with 10,000 iron teeth on my side. Ooh. Ooh. I can't breathe. I'm gonna be dehydrated after this. Hi, welcome back. This is the penultimate, second to last book in my Kingdom of Ash recap, which means it's also the second to last book in my Throne of Glass recap, the whole series, which is very bittersweet. And honestly, we have to go through a lot of bitter in these last two videos to get to the end. I love this book series so much. This book wrecks me. This morning, I finished the slides last night. Was crying, obviously. This morning, I cried while I was just sitting there, minding my own beeswax, thinking about these slides. So, it's gonna be rough. We're just gonna hope we can get through it in one piece. First, I want to talk about what I'm gonna be doing next. I have been loving making these recap videos. Obviously, I'm almost done with Throne of Glass, so I'm gonna need a new book to work on. I will at some point be doing ACOTAR. I'm thinking probably early next year. Will I be doing Crescent City? I haven't decided yet. I have not decided yet. Probably I'll end up doing Crescent City at some point too. That book I have a more complicated relationship with than I do with ACOTAR and Throne of Glass. Okay. But I wanted to give you a hint on what our next book is. So our next book, I'll officially tell you what the next book is next video. So you can like, I don't know, read it if you haven't read it, or like emotionally prepare if you have read it. Our next book is going to be an ongoing series. So it's not a complete series. It is a series that is currently under releases. Like it's currently active, which is different than Throne of Glass, obviously. Throne of Glass I read when it was complete and recapped when it was complete. This is still has books coming out, and it has vampires. It's a fantasy world, but it has vampires. So that is going to be the next book series I am doing. Please let me know if there's any other series that you think that would make for good conversations. I think mostly fantasy, although I love doing my Magnolia Parks videos as well. Those are contemporary. I probably won't ever do like standalones. That just seems, I don't know. I'm never say never, but like standalones don't appeal to me, especially like a contemporary standalone. Like I'm not going to tell you what happened in Beach Read. Let me know if there's any like fantasy series, whether they're complete or incomplete. I won't make any promises ever because I just cannot foresee myself ever making one of these book series on a book that I don't enjoy. I know a lot of people on YouTube make like rant reviews on books that they do not enjoy so much, and I watch them, and that sometimes I have a giggly fun time watching them, but I just don't see myself doing that. I just like have to spend too much time with these books, and I don't want to spend time with books I don't like. Second thing, I'm going to be making like a chatty Throne of Glass video where I just like talk about some of my like general thoughts about the series, probably a week or two after I finish the whole thing, so like a month or so from now, just kind of talking about like my character ranking. Someone asked me to do that once, and like favorite moments and anything else that you want me to talk about. So if you have any like questions or things you want my opinion on, or just want to hear me yap about, please leave them in the comments of this video and the next video, and I will try to talk about it in that chatty video about Throne of Glass. Let's jump in to part 2 of Kingdom of Ash, Gods and Gates. So we open with Dorian, and Dorian, remember, as we left Dorian, I didn't do a recap this time. Why? I don't know. Hopefully you're following along. But last we left Dorian, he was leaving the 13 and the witches in general, the Crochans as well, because he was headed to Morath to try to get the third and final word key. He's mastered shapeshifting, and he flies there as a little baby raven, crow, I think a raven. And look at him, he's so cute. He just flies right into Morath. There's a lot of ravens there, so he fits right in, and then he sneaks in a back door that's being used by the laundry people as they like come in and out, and he sneaks inside. And then he turns himself into a little mouse. Dorian has a pretty good mental map of Morath because if you remember, back in Empire of Storms, Aedion and Manon spent like a lot of time while they were on that boat together with Manon describing in detail what Morath looked like where the hallways were, where the like spaces where things were at, giving Aedion a general floor plan. And Dorian was also in there while that was happening, and apparently he retained that information, which like good for him. I guess he's like really paying attention. And he's like sneaking up this flight of stairs, and it's like really tricky because he just has like little tiny mouse legs, and he goes to the kitchen because he knows that's where like the gossip is, and he wants to know what the haps are. He wants to get the gossip from the gossipy girlies. And so he goes to the kitchen, and the girlies are in the kitchen chatting, and it's clear they're very afraid of Erewhon. They really don't say anything that important except that like Erewhon, yes, is here at the castle. And Dorian is thinking to himself that like Actually, I know that Keltane explicitly told me do not try to go toe-to-toe with Erewhon, and Manon also told me that, and Gavin might have also said that, I can't remember, but, like, I think I could do it, probably. Like, it would be so fun if I could just go in there, off Erewhon. Dorian was explicitly told not to directly engage with Erewhon because, like, dangerous. Danger, 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 danger. But is he listening? No. He's not. That's okay. Finally, Dorian does find Erewhon. He, like, sneaks into what happens to be, like, Erewhon's study. And he's like, ew, the vibes here are truly terrible. Also, he doesn't look like Duke Parrington anymore. Does he look like a devil in a suit? No. He does look like a blonde man. This is my Erewhon. And he's the devil in a suit. He doesn't look like Duke Parrington anymore, is the long and short of it. And in the office, there's also this woman in this cloak. And she is looking mysterious. Dorian's like, she has interesting vibes. Who the heck is she? Luckily, we find out pretty quickly, it's Maeve. It's Maeve. Maeve is here. She, like, says her name. And Dorian had never directly interacted with Maeve because he hadn't seen her on the beach that day. He was one of the crew that was stuck on the beach. And he had no occasion to see her in real life, I guess. You would have thought, as, like, the Prince of Arlene, that, like, maybe we would have had, like, a diplomatic trip to Dornell. We would have seen a portrait of her. We would have seen something. But if you have to remind yourself, Dorian was actually really bad at being a prince in that he wanted to learn nothing about ruling. He was here to kiss girls. That was his primary focus. Aedion and the crew arrive at Orynth off of Captain Rolf's ship. I actually don't remember exactly who's there, but I think, like, the important players got on the boat to Orynth. But remember, like, their men are actually marching to Orynth because there was not enough room on the boats. So they're arriving ahead. They know that Morath is directly on the tail of their men that are marching. Aedion is in generally a bad mood. He's feeling pretty bad about the just, like, number of deaths that are on his hand. Like, we've already lost a lot of men in this war so far, and, like, more are gonna be dying. The lords meet them in the council room. They're like, hi guys, we're ready to chat. And Darrow is like, hey, where the heck is Killian? The general who's, like, actually in charge. Remember how I put him in charge? Why are you here, Aedion? And Aedion is like, well, he's actually marching with the armies. I am coming here, like, ahead to, like, prepare the way. And then Darrow turns to Rolf and is like, I've heard we have you to thank for our army's, like, escape, for the reason they were able to escape at all, for our lucky retreat. And Rolf is like, yes, you are welcome. I am the Pirate Lord, also the heir to the Mysians. And Darrow's like, so the thing is, the Mysians are gone. Like, why are you saying that you're heir to the Mysians? That's kind of silly goofy, because there are no Mysians. And Rolf's like, okay, well, they're literally outside. They're literally in the river back there. So, actually, I think some of them went back to the ocean. Maybe most of them. But, like, they were here. And he says that. He's like, oh, okay, well, they're here to repay a debt. Like, there's some of them here, and they're here to repay a debt to Aelin Galathinius and to Terrasin as a whole. And then Lysandra pipes in, because she is sick of Darrow being like, you don't even know what you're talking about. There are no boats. Also, stop calling Aelin the queen. Who the heck even is she? Just a rando. And Lysandra says, no. You have Aelin to thank for that. All of them. All of them came here because of Aelin, not you. So before you sneer that there is no Her Majesty's Armada, allow me to tell you that there is, and you are not a part of it. Lysandra is like, no. I'm really sick of your shenanigans. We've let you get away with this for far too long. Everything you have is thanks to Miss Aelin Galathinius. And Darrow tries to be like, get out of here. Who are you even? Like, you are just like a rando lady. You're just a courtesan. Get out of town. You're not a lady. We do not recognize you as, like, your status that has been, like, given to you by this false queen. And Aedion is like, hey, stop. Don't call Lysandra names. Also, she is a lady. Lady being, like, the formal title, not, like, lady being, like, a gender. You know, confusing. And Murtagh is like, I know how to diffuse the situation. And so Murtagh steps up and is like, hey, Evangeline is actually in the tower if you want to see her. And so Lysandra is, like, happy to leave and go see Evangeline because she'd rather hang out with Evangeline than stinky old Darrow anyway. And so everyone gets their way. Like, Lysandra gets to leave on her terms to go see Evangeline, and Darrow doesn't have to look at Lysandra anymore because he is the worst. He's not the worst. There are definitely worse people. We'll talk about them. And as soon as she leaves, Aedion is like, she fought on the front lines during every single battle and nearly died against her enemies. I didn't see any of you bothering to do the same. Like, please treat her with a modicum of respect because she deserves it probably more than any of you guys. And Darrow was like, it is harder than you might think to be too old to fight while you watch younger people go and die for your country. I think we start to see Darrow as, like, a more complex figure in this section. You see him as someone who is, like, really grounded in the old ways, and also causing this like bureaucratic roadblocks along the way for Aedion and Aelin and the crew. That's kind of how we've seen him so far. I think we get to really see him a little bit more as a person and understand where he's coming from, and he's coming from the same place that Aedion and Aelin are coming from, which is a love of country. He just is going about it in a different way, in an unhelpful way. No one is saying that he's going about it in a helpful way, but it is coming from a good place. He's not trying to cause harm. He is just trying to like maintain the structure that he knows and loves about Terrasen. And then that night they start to like plan for a siege. Darrow and the other lords have been preparing for the siege since they've kind of found out what's going on. And so there's not like a ton they need to do in terms of supplies and stuff. They've prepared that fairly well. But in terms of like making plans and like who is going to go where and all of that stuff, because they don't have a ton of time before Orynth is going to arrive. And Aedion winds up like wandering off. He wants to go check on Lysandra, and he finds her not with Evangeline where he expected to find her, but in this empty throne room instead. It's just like an empty dais where the antler throne used to be, because Ardelane has like completely destroyed it when they took over Terrasen. Lysandra's green eyes slid towards him, dim with exhaustion and sorrow. Deep down, she said quietly, some part of me thought I'd live to see her sitting here. She pointed to the dais, to where the antler throne had once been. Deep down, I thought we might eventually make it somehow, even with Orynth and the lock and all of it. There was no hope in her face, and it was perhaps because of that she bothered to speak to him. I thought so too, Aedion said with an equal quiet, though the words echoed in the vast, empty chamber. I thought so too. So essentially what this scene is serving to tell us is that vibes are low. Morale is low. Aedion and Lysandra are kind of seeing the situation as hopeless. Like, they're not going to be able to defeat Orynth, even with like having the advantage of like being a walled city. There's just like no way. They don't have enough forces to defeat Orynth. The best they can do is like hold off Orynth long enough for like a miracle to arrive. They like don't even know what they would be waiting for. There is nothing else that is like promised to them. Like no one else is promised to arrive. Like they're hoping Aelin's gonna show back up at some point. Don't know where the witches are. They never heard anything back from Chaol about the Southern Continent. Like there's potential out there, but none of it feels like super promising. And so they're kind of just like preparing to make this like last stand against Morath, even though it probably won't work. Meanwhile, back in Morath itself, we're back with Mouse Dorian, and he is like freaking out in the corner as Maeve like sits in front of him next to Erwan. He's like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. Maeve and Erwan in one room. Cuckoo bananas. Wow. And we get this conversation that we're like listening in on. Maeve says, you do not recognize me, to Erwan. And Erwan says, you are Maeve, Queen of the Fae. And Maeve says, millennia apart and you have forgotten even your own sister-in-law. Erwan went still. You? Maeve smiled. Me. Those golden eyes roved over the Fae Queen in Fae skin all this time. I'm disappointed that you did not figure it out. And they like are chatting. I think Dorian is like losing his ever-loving mind because Dorian knows like absolutely nothing about Maeve. Like Dorian this is like the first Dorian is finding out that Maeve is actually Val, that she is like family sort of with Erwan. Erwan is like, hello, sister-in-law. That is so crazy that you are here. I guess I like have you honestly to thank for the fact that I'm here. I have been having such a like super fun cutie patootie time taking over this world. So like thank you for bringing us to this world. It has been a blast. Anyway, what do you want? Why are you here? Like it's so strange that you have spent all this time being like the sneakiest lady in all the land and we didn't even catch you and now you just show up. And the vibes are weirdly flirty. Like Maeve suggests that maybe she should have married Erwan instead of the brother she actually married, and Erwan isn't like, ew, gross, get away from me. They just like are weirdly flirty with each other. Maeve says to him in response, my people have betrayed me. After all I have done for them, all I have protected them, they rose up against me. The army I gathered refused to march. My nobles, my servants refused to kneel. I am queen of Dorinel no longer. And Erwan says, I have a guess of who might be behind this. And Maeve says, it's Aelin, and I did plan to bring her here when I was ready, but she was like stolen from me. She like explains kind of the vaguest explanation of the fact that like she had Aelin captured, but then Aelin was snatched away because some like untrustworthy people, whatever. But what we learn in this, we're talking about this with Aelin in the last part, is that Aelin sent a letter to Rowan's uncle being like, hey, Maeve is Valg. She's also evil. So like maybe don't listen to her anymore. And it seems like that letter works because now Maeve has like no army, because we know that the cadre obviously has pretty much all left her, but her army was still, last we heard, was still on Team Maeve. And now they seem to not be on Team Maeve anymore. So anyway, so like Maeve is just like a lady now. She's not a queen. I mean, she's still a super powerful lady, but like she's not the boss anymore, which is fascinating. Dorian gets so excited in the corner because this is the first time he has found out that Aelin has been freed from Maeve. He didn't know that Aelin had actually gotten away from Maeve, and so like exciting news. Aelin's a free lady, and we love that for her. And we also learn that Aelin, or Dorian learns, we already knew this, that Aelin is in Anel, and that makes him excited because he's hoping that his bestie Kale is with her, because Kale is from Anel, obviously. And so he's like, oh my gosh, maybe they're together at last, and then maybe I can go there, and then we can all be together, and the trio will be back together again, and it'll be so much fun. Maeve continued, Aelin Galathinius will come for me. If she survives you, I do not plan to allow her the chance to do so. Erewhon's smile grew. So, you think to ally with me. And Maeve says, only together can we ensure that Brandon's bloodline is toppled forever, never to rise again. And Erewhon is like, okay, I'm liking this plan, this sounds kind of fun, but I do have a question for you. If you had Aelin captured, why don't you just kill her? That like really could have solved all our problems if you just offed her. And Maeve is like, yeah, well, you know, like reasons and things, and you know, she doesn't explain to her well, but she does distract him. And she's like, hey, I have something else you might be interested in, and look at this cool thing I can do. And she opens a portal, like through the side, because remember, Maeve is like very good at like world walking, is what she calls it, where she can open portals to worlds without like all the hubbubaloo of like the word keys. She's just like able to open portals and like walk on through them. So she opens a portal, and one of her spiders crawls through. She's like, look at this. These are mine. Maeve explains that like when the Fae cast me aside, I return to those who have always been loyal to me. She headed to the southern continent to hang out with Kerr and Kui. She said, hey, spider girlies, I'm back. And they're like, oh my gosh, we have been waiting for you. So glad to have you back. And Erewhon is like, okay, that's like cool and fine, but like, what am I going to do with a whole bunch of spiders? Like, I already have a whole army. It's like super cool. It's full of like scary creatures. I don't need spiders. And Maeve is like, can your army do this? And then her spider starts to tap dance. Just kidding. I wish this is what happened. Unfortunately, it is not. She says, okay, my spiders are my spies. So I have hecka cool, super cool spies. You could have them. Just saying, they would be kind of fun. Also, I know you've been having trouble finding a host for the Valg princesses. I know you had found one in the southern continent, but like she got exorcised by Irene because Irene is the coolest. And so now you don't have anyone to like, you know, be the body for the Valg princesses. And I know that they're like really tricky to find bodies for. You know who would be great bodies for the Valg princesses? These spiders. And everyone was like, okay, that's actually super interesting. But what am I going to say when my brother shows up? And I'm like, hey, your wife and I have actually been working together. And Maeve says, tell Orcus I grew bored of waiting for him to come home from his conquest. I would have much rather joined him. And honestly, this feels like kind of fair to me because in this section, in general, it's so easy for me to fall into Team Maeve because I understand her underlying motivation. I'm like, yeah, girly, I get that. I hate being bored so much. I do. I hate it so much. But like, and I can understand not wanting to go back with your boring husband who like locks you in a tower and doesn't let you do anything fun in the world that doesn't even have the color blue. Ugh, that sounds terrible. I totally get that. I unfortunately can't be fully on Team Maeve because she does like brutally torture people. For no real good reason. But like, I wish I could be. I like really think she has some good reasons. Even if she is evil, okay? And I don't know, that's my truth. Erewhon is like, okay, I will think about it. Back to the conversation. Erewhon is like, I will think about what we're gonna do. But for now, you have to stay here as my guest. And Maeve's like, for sure, that sounds reasonable. And two guards leave Maeve up to a bedroom, and Dorian decides to follow her in mousy form. And the moment the guards close her in the bedroom, Maeve says, do you plan to hide in that pathetic form all day? Dorian lunged for the gap between the door and the floor, but her black booted foot slammed down upon his tail. LOL. Oh my gosh. I love the Maeve Dorian stuff in this part. It's like so fun. I think it's so fun and so such a delight. So anyway, Maeve obviously knew it was Dorian the whole time. Obviously knew it was him the whole time. The Fae Queen smiled down at him. You are not a very skilled spy, King of Adelaide. Hilarious. Again, if she wasn't so evil, I would be such a Maeve fan. And then she like grabs Dorian with her Valg magic and he like feels it and it is the same feeling as the color. Like he can tell that they're from the same source. Gives him a little PTSD moment because he's traumatized from having the Valg collar on him. And then he turns back into human form. I have a question here for Miss Sarah J. Maas, okay? If you're not Sarah J. Maas, you probably can't answer. Maybe you can answer it. You can also answer it if you know the answer. Dorian shifts back into human form, and he is clothed, we are told, okay? He is clothed. I'm gonna have to assume. Like, Lysandra, when she shifts, is butt naked. So I'm just, like, confused on why Dorian gets outfits. He shifts him back and forth all the time in this next section, and it does appear that he has clothes on. It would be weird if he did not. If he was just, like, naked and they just didn't mention it in these scenes. Like, if Maeve and Dorian have this next conversation and he's just butt naked standing there, I feel like that's weird. And I feel like that's not implied. There might even at some point say that he's wearing clothes. And I just don't know how that works, because I do think Lysandra transforms naked. Does he shapeshift his outfits too? Can he shapeshift other stuff around him? I have, like, questions about how it works for Mr. Dori. My next note here says, it says he has his sword, so I guess not. So I guess when he's a mouse, he can shapeshift his sword with him? Okay, if you say so. Dorian's like, oh my gosh, Maeve, how did you know that it was me? You are so smart and sneaky. And Maeve is like, you did not think I beheld you. You're sent to the field of your power in Aelin's memories, though my spies did not report your interest in shifting. Like, I didn't know you were a shifter. That is new information to me. But, like, I smelled you and I said, oh my gosh, that's Dorian. Oh my gosh, Dori! And Dorian is like, spies, oh my gosh, that spider, Cyrene, was a spy for Maeve. I'm so glad I killed her, because turns out she was evil enough to know good. And she was spying on the witches. And Maeve is like, yeah, her, but also, like, the mountains are literally full of spiders. Like, you guys weren't looking that closely for spiders, and they were spying on you literally all the time. And then Maeve is like, but I actually don't know where the witches are currently. Could you let me know? And she tries to pry into Dorian's mind, but Dorian, like, builds, like, this ice wall up, and she can't get past it. And she's like, ugh, that's very dramatic, but I guess it's effective. The whole room is, like, icy. And then Dorian is like, why haven't you called the guards on me? If you knew that I was there the whole time, why don't you say something and get me, like, captured and thrown in a collar? You know you could. And Maeve is like, actually, I think we could be great allies. We both want what Erewhon has. Doesn't that make us allies of a sort? And Dorian is like, sort of, but, like, I would never, ever, ever give you the keys. It's literally been kind of the whole point of this, like, book series since, like, Queen of Shadows. Since, like, Air of Fire, actually, is like, make sure this lady doesn't get the keys. And Maeve is like, okay, well, what would you do with them, Dorian? Destroy them? And Dorian's like, well, what would you do with them? Conquer worlds? And Maeve laughs. Oh, nothing is common in that. I would make sure that Erewhon and his brothers can never return. Damaris remained warm in his hands. The queen spoke of truth, or at least some part of it. We will, in this, I don't think I mentioned it. I, like, am not that interested in the swords, okay? Sorry, that's a fault of me. And Damaris is a sword that can sense the truth, I guess. It's like a truth-telling sword. And we've known this. So if it warms up, then the truth is being told. So as it warms to Maeve's answer, Dorian knows that she's not lying about the fact that she does plan to close this world to Erewhon and his brothers. So adds a complication to things. Dorian was like, okay, well, you were just, like, flirting with Erewhon, like, a minute ago. You seemed, like, pretty quick to betray him. And Maeve is like, yeah, duh. Obviously. You think I would actually ally with him? Do you understand that, like, he is the brother of my annoying husband? I'm not. I actually came here looking for you. I knew you'd likely be headed to Morath soon to get the third word key, so I knew if I should appear, like, you probably should appear and we could, like, would meet up. And Dorian is like, what? That doesn't even make sense. That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Also, you offered Erewhon the spiders. Like, clearly you're cool with him doing something because, like, you're giving him, like, something to help him. And Maeve is like, yeah, it is a little bit of a sacrifice. I'm a little bit bummed. But, like, we are not so different, you and I. We have nothing to lose now thanks to your friend. Essentially, Maeve is trying to be like, well, I was, like, cornered. Like, essentially, like, I'm running out of options. Aelin is really causing a lot of problems for me. And she's also causing problems for you by, like, making you have to sacrifice yourself. So we're kind of in the same boat. And Dorian is like, oh my gosh, it's time to use this to my advantage. Schemy time. I have to scheme quickly and on my toes. But luckily, Dorian, I feel like, learned from the best of them. Like, Dorian is actually, like, fairly good at scheming. I would say, in terms of scheming, we have our best schemer, Aelin Galathinius. Our second best schemer, Elide Lorcan. And Dorian might be third. Dorian might be third best schemer. He's, like, pretty good at it. And he turns on, also, his superpower of flirting. And he starts to flirt a little with Maeve, spinning stories that he knows that Maeve will want to hear. He says to her, Aelin seems to be skilled at wrecking the kingdoms of other people while protecting her own. And Maeve says, and at letting others pay her debts. Isn't that why you are here? Maeve asked. To be the sacrifice so that Aelin need not destroy herself. Such a terrible waste for either of you to pay the price for Elena's foolishness. And Dorian is like, you are right, it is. This like really sucks for everyone. And Maeve is like, oh my gosh, do you want to know what I discovered when I peered into Aelin's mind? You kind of won't believe it. She's super glad that it's you that's going to get sacrificed instead of her. And Dorian is like, well, that does make sense, to be honest. That's not crazy. She does have a kingdom and a husband, so it does make sense that she kind of wishes it wasn't her. I also wish it kind of wasn't me. You know, like, this does seem like a bad time, and if someone else were to do it, I would be like, oh, shucks, but I would get over it, you know? Maeve is like, you also have a kingdom. You were like, Aelin has a kingdom, but like, Dorian, you have a kingdom. While this conversation is happening, Maeve has like a tendril of her magic trying to like poke its way into Dorian's mind, and Dorian is like, hey, stop that. If you're trying to ally with me, you're picking a strange way of showing it by like trying to worm yourself into my mind. And Maeve is like, oh, can you blame me for trying? Like, I had to give it another go. And Dorian is like, you think I would betray my friends that easily? Like, I would immediately turn against Aelin, my buddy? For you, this woman I just met, who I know is evil and has had her captured? And Maeve's like, no. Is it really betrayal? To find an alternative to you and Aelin Galathini is paying the ultimate price. It was what I intended for her all along, to keep her from being a sacrifice to unfeeling gods. The gods are afraid of me, of Erwan, of the keys. They are afraid of you. You and Aelin, Firebringer, powerful enough to send them home or to damn them. Why not defy them? Why bow to their wishes? What have they ever done for you? I'm not asking you to turn against Aelin. I'm asking you to turn against the gods. Those are different things, and the gods are annoying. We can all agree. And Maeve's not wrong. We can all agree. And Dorian is like, so the thing is, I really don't think there's another way to end this besides like sacrificing myself using the keys. And Maeve is like, no. You don't understand. The keys could end it without you. They could do literally anything. They're so powerful. They could destroy Erwan, banish those gods back to their home, open another door to realms of resting and peace. You could see your girlfriend like up ahead. Just saying. You don't have to, but it's just a suggestion. And Dorian's like, okay, interesting. A thought. What if you allied not only with me, but Ardelane? What if you used your powers to help me in this moment, but also became a powerful lady that sat beside me in Ardelane? And Maeve was like, let's pause for a second, because like a minute ago you were mad that I kidnapped your bestie, and now you are proposing marriage. And Dorian's like, oh my gosh, still mad about that. We can talk about that later, but I can see the value of our relationship. Okay? Like, I can look past that and look at the value of our relationship, and like, I'll make you a queen of a much larger territory. Dornell, tiny. Ardelane? Pretty substantial. When she did not speak, Dorian leaned against the door, the portrait of courtly nonchalance. You think I'm trying to trick you? Perhaps I am. And Maeve says, and Manon Blackbeak, what of your promises to her? Remember, she had spiders. She was spying. And she saw the flirty relationship between Dorian and Manon. And she says, I know you've been flirting with the witchy. And Dorian's like, no. I have made her no promises regarding my throne, and she wants nothing to do with them anyway. Marriages have been built on far more volatile foundations than this one. And Maeve goes, Aelin of the Wildfire might very well mark you as an enemy if we get married. She might be like, you married my kidnapper. That's not cool with me, Dorian. We're no longer besties. Dorian's like, okay, well, that'll probably be a later problem because she's not going to kill me before this war is done. She like needs allies to protect Terrasen. And she's going to discover soon enough that she's not the only one capable of saving this world. Like, I could save it too. Like, Aelin doesn't get to have all of the fun. I know she's on the cover of all of the books, except the one that's Kale's book. Crazy that Kale got a book and I didn't. Perhaps she'll even come to thank me if she's as eager to avoid being sacrificed as you claimed. And Maeve's red mouth curved upward. You are young and brash. Dorian sketched a bow again. I am also exceedingly handsome and willing to offer up my throne as a gesture of good faith. And in this moment, Maeve is a little starstruck, a little like bowled over by Dorian's flirting superpowers. She underestimated him. She did not realize that although he has crazy good ice magic, he also has crazy amazing flirting superpowers. But Maeve is like, whoa. I could just sell you out to Erwan instead. Like, this sounds interesting, but like my other option is also like pretty beneficial to me. Like, I could sell you out to Erwan so quick. It would be so easy, so fun, and I would definitely reap the rewards. And Dorian is like, Like a hound bringing a pheasant back to his master, it was you who posed this alliance between us, not me. But consider this, shall you kneel or shall you rule, Maeve? He tapped his neck right over the pale band across it. I have knelt, and I have found I have no interest in doing so again. Not for Erwan, not for Aelin, or for anyone. Another shrug. The woman I love is dead. My kingdom is in pieces. What do I have to lose? He let some of the old ice, the hollowness in his chest, rise to his face. I'm willing to play this game, Maeve. Are you? And then Maeve says to him, you came to Morath for a key and will leave with the bride. Dorian nearly sagged with relief. I will leave with both. And quickly. And so then Dorian spends the next few days, like, transforms back into Raven form, and he is just looking all over the outside of Morath. He's looking at the campfires of the army that is stationed there, and he is just, like, recognizing how dangerous he's in. He is now, like, really playing a game with Maeve right under Erwan's nose. He's just, like, in a situation where one wrong step, he's back at that collar. But while he's thinking about that, he's actually doing some recon. He's decided he needs to learn a little bit more about what Erwan is up to. And so he hears this conversation that is happening in the castle between one of the guards and Vernon. And Vernon is annoyed that Erwan won't see him. And Dorian gets himself a little idea. He decides to shape shift into Vernon and wait outside of Erwan's office door. He waits till Erwan is done with whatever he's doing, and then when he comes out, Erwan is like, oh my gosh, Vernon, why are you still here? I thought I dismissed you for the night. And Dorian is like, I had returned to my chambers, but I had realized I had a lingering question, my lord. This immediately, like, made me go, what? My lord is a weird word. It's a weird word, and I was like, I feel like this is not a word that is used that often. And I have, like, the big ebook set that's like all of the Throne of Glass books, and so I looked up how often my lord is used, and my lord is used 3 times outside of the Book of Kingdom of Ash. 3 times in total in every other book in the series. One of which is Irene making fun of Kale. So, like, there's only 2 instances of it being used as, like, a sign of respect. One of them is Vernon talking to Erwan, but still, I was like, why are we using this? Goes on to use it 4 times in this conversation. 4 times in this conversation that does not last that long. It is like maybe like 4 or 5 pages. He uses my lord 4 times. And I just think like Dorian maybe overacting in the scene just a little bit. Bless his sweet baby heart. Anyway, Erwan is like, okay, what do you want, Vernon? And Dorian is like, why? Why are you doing this? You might have made yourself lord of a dozen other territories, yet you graced us with this one. I have long wondered why. I like, again, Dorian, like, I love that you're curious. I love that you have questions. But, like, this seems like the type of question that would immediately get you caught. Like, Vernon is not going in and being like, hey, I was gonna go to bed, but I was wondering, like, why did you decide to, like, stay here? Like, what's up with that? Like, that's not what he's doing. And, Erwan is like, okay. Erwan doesn't seem at all fazed by this. And he's like, we've conquered a lot of worlds, but this one banished my brothers. And I felt like the least I could do was, like, make sure it was, like, ready for them, so that this world kind of mirrors the one we came from. So when they arrive here, they're like, oh my gosh, this place is really nice. This place is really lovely. Thanks, bro, for making this for us. And Dorian is like, I know what it is to have a rivalry with your brother, because Vernon and his brother had a rivalry. Vernon killed Elide's dad, who is his brother. So he's like, brothers, am I right? And Erwan is like, you killed yours. I love my brothers dearly. So actually, you don't know what you're talking about. My brothers and I are bros, and you are bro, and we're not bros. And Vernon is like, okay, for sure. I was also wondering, like, what are you gonna do with everyone in this world? Are we all gonna get murdered? Are we gonna work for you? Like, what's the vibes? What's the vibes? And Erwan is like, why are you asking so many questions suddenly? You've literally never cared about the people in this world, literally ever. Like, not even your own niece. And Dorian is like, oh my gosh, so sorry about her. So sorry about that situation. I know we had her, and then she, like, ran off, and, like, she kind of, like, was part of the part that, like, split the castle, but, like, and she, like, took a word key with her. I could, like, go look for her if you wanted me to. And Erwan is like, she doesn't even have the word key anymore. I, like, have no use for your weird little niece. I had a use for the word key that she stole, though. And then he's like, anyway, could you leave? You're, like, kind of being annoying, and I don't really know why you're here. And then before Dorian leaves, he turns back and he's like, do you truly hate them? Dorian blurted out. Erwan half turned towards him. Dorian asked, the humans, Aelin Galathinius, Dorian Havillard, all of them. Do you truly hate them? Why do you make us suffer so greatly? And Erwan's golden eyes guttered. They would keep me from my brothers, he said. I will let nothing stand in the way of my reunion with them. And Dorian goes, surely there must be another way to reunite without, like, such a giant war. This seems like a lot of work to just see your bros. And Erewhon is like, yeah, but like, where would the fun in that be? Like, the war is not entirely necessary, but it is kind of fun. And then Dorian's like, oh, also I had like one quickity more question. I know I said I didn't have any more and you told me to leave, but I actually have another one really quick. You know the King of Ardelayne? Like, what was his deal? And Erewhon is like, yeah, he was like really annoying. Like, even though he didn't have like strong magic, he did not bow completely to the caller. It was so annoying, so irritating. But like, what are you gonna do? And then he's like, also, go away for real now. Like, please don't ask any more questions. And Dorian leaves. He turns back into a mouse as soon as he gets to the hallway, and he goes to Maeve. And Maeve is like, why did you go directly to Erewhon, you stupid, stupid, stupid boy? You dummy. You dumb, dumb, dummy. Also, I don't feel like we learned anything that valuable. Like, Dorian was just like, why are you doing this? Anyway, back in the mountains, the Wild Fang Mountains, Bort and Nezrin arrive at the Ferian Gap. Remember, I believe they were with the side of the army that was traveling up the river, which was a faster passage. They were traveling in the two armies are like traveling one along the river and one along the mountains to kind of like sandwich the witches because they know they're going to have to encounter them. Or they suppose they were going to have to encounter them in the Ferian Gap. But Nezrin and Bort like fly out ahead to kind of like scout things out, and they arrive at the Ferian Gap and it is empty. Like, there are no signs of any sentries, no wyverns. It's like the witches have literally just vanished. Like, there's nobody here, really. And they're like, this is so weird. They, like, look and look and look, can't find anyone. Back with Kale and everyone else. They're hiking to the White Fangs. It's been hard, but they're making, like, pretty good time given the terrain that they're having to pass. And also the fact that they're traveling with, like, such a large army. Obviously, it's, slower when you have a lot of people and stuff with you. Kai, one of the wild men, is like, hey, we're a day out from the gap. This is kind of the most dangerous part of the trip because if the witches spot us, they spot us, and there's like not much we can do about it. And it turns out we like come to learn that the wild men were also like pretty eager to partner up with them, not only because they got a little slice of Enel from Kale, but also because the witches have been kind of infringing on their territory. The Ferian Gap used to be part of the wild men's territory and an area where they did like quite a bit of hunting, but now the witches are there, and so it's like too dangerous to go there, and they're annoyed about it. So they're like happy to get the witches out of their village. And Kale, the whole time he's been with the Wild Fang Men, he is just thinking about the fact that he killed Cain back in book 1, and he's like panicky about it. He's like kind of like anxious and antsy, and is like, I'm not going to mention it to them. He's like having intrusive thoughts about just shouting out the fact that he killed Cain, and then being like mad about it. That's essentially what's happening. Like, no one is bringing it up. No one is asking about it. No one is like, hey, did you know Cain? He was at the palace. And Kale starts like sweating and crying. That's not happening. He's just like in his own head being like, I hope they don't know that I killed their friend Cain. Maybe they didn't like Cain. He was not a super nice guy. Like, maybe he wasn't liked by the wild men either. Okay? Like, calm down. Also, I think there's more than like 3 of them. These guys might not have even really known Cain that well. Or at all. Tonight, they are going to have to camp nearish the gap, and it'll be dangerous again because there's nowhere for them to hide this army, and so they're going to be visible. So they'll have to keep, like, some more sentries up and, like, be prepared that they, like, might have to fight. Aelin frowned at Kai's disappearing form. That man has a flair for the dramatic, and should have earned him a place on some of Rifthold's finest stages. Fine praise indeed coming from you. She winked, patting Goldrin's pommel. The stone seemed to flare in response. I know a kindred spirit when I see one. I just, like, love this. I just think it's cutie when we reference the fact that Aelin loves a show. Aelin loves a performance. She loves a shopping. She loves a chocolate cake. Like, it's cutie, and we love it. Aelin is like, hey, guys, don't even worry about it. Me and the Fae boys have been tunneling down into our magic since we left Enel. Like, we will keep everyone safe tonight. Like, we'll just, like, if the witches show up, we'll just pew 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 them out of the sky with our magic powers, and it'll be easy breezy, beautiful cover girl. Don't even sweat it. They're getting ready to settle in for the night when Gabrielle comes over to talk to Kale, and Gabrielle's like, hey, Kale, I did not have a chance to congratulate you and your wife on your happy news. And Kale is like, thank you, but, like, it's kind of weirded out because him and Gabrielle have exchanged, like, no words. Like, they've interacted in, like, war meetings, but, like, they're not friends. They're not friends. So he's just like, oh, thanks so much. Gabrielle says, I was not granted the opportunity you have to be present from the start, to see my son grow into a man. And Kale's like, I'm sorry, that's a real bummer. Anyway, and Gabrielle goes on, I didn't tell you for sympathy. The lion looked at him, and Kale felt the weight of every one of Gabrielle's centuries weighing upon him, but rather to tell you what you perhaps already know, to savor every moment of it. Which is, like, super sweet. And then they talk about Aedion and how Aedion has not been interested in forming a relationship with Gabrielle, like, at all. And Kale is like, I think he's going to come around. Like, I think he's going to come around because you are a good man. Like, you are a good man. You And he will see that. Like, I know what it is to have like a really sucky father, and you're a pretty cool one. So I think Aedion's gonna come around. And Gabrielle's like, maybe, if Aedion does choose to forgive me. And Chaol's like, he will. Chaol said he'd make Aedion do it. He's like, no, I see Gabrielle. Gabrielle is sick and cool. If I have to have a chat with Aedion, tell him to be nice to Gabrielle, I will. And Gabrielle is like, why are you so certain? Chaol considered his words carefully before he met Gabrielle's striking gaze. Because you are his father, and no matter what might lie between you, Aedion will always want to forgive you. And then he continues, I wish I had been so lucky to have you as a father. I did like tear up a little bit here. I think this is like a really sweet moment. Because Chaol's like, my father sucked, and you're like a really nice guy. Surprise and something far deeper passed across Gabrielle's face. His tattooed throat bobbed. Thank you. Perhaps it is our lot to never have the fathers we wish, but to still hope that they might surpass what they are, flaws and all. Chaol refrained from telling Gabrielle he was already more than enough. Gabrielle said quietly, I shall endeavor to be worthy of my son. And Chaol is about to tell him that he already is worthy of his son. Like, Gabrielle is already a good man who deserves Aedion. Because Aedion's, like, fine. Aedion's not that special. Sorry, Gabrielle. He's, like, pretty average in general, I would say. So, like, you can be his dad. No big deal. And Chaol's about to say that, but then they see something flying overhead. It is Nezran and Bort. And Nezran and Bort land, and they're like, hello? And Aelin is like, okay, tell us how bad it is. What's the situation in the Ferian Gap? And Bort is like, so the thing is, we have been through everywhere 3 times, and it doesn't make any sense. We know that, but, like, the witches are gone. It is completely empty. And Chaol is like, empty? What? And Bort goes on. A few of the furnaces were still going, so someone must be there. But there wasn't one witch or wyvern. Whoever remains behind is minimal, likely no more than the trainers or breeders. Rowan scanned the peak ahead. We need to learn what they know then. Nezran's nod was grim. Sartak already has people on it. Meanwhile, back in Morath, we have Dorian. This is Dorian's Eras Tour poster of Morath. Dorian hunted through Morath in 100 different skins, on the silent feet of a cat, or scuttling along the floors of the cockroach, or hanging from a rafter as a bat. He spent the better part of a week listening, looking for Erwan. Erwan still remained unaware of his presence. Perhaps the nature of his raw magic indeed provided him with an anonymity, and Maeve had only known to recognize it thanks to whatever she'd pried from Aelin's mind. Meanwhile, Maeve is bringing spiders through the portal for Erwan, but Dorian has yet to encounter them once they've been possessed by a Valg princess. He's only seen them kind of as spiders. And Dorian is still, like, looking for the key all day, every day, but hasn't been able to sense it or find it, although he has not yet searched Erwan's tower because it is, like, too dangerous. And I am perplexed at this choice. Like, besties, I could have told you it was in the tower. Like, before we got here, I could have said, probably Erwan is keeping it really close to him because it's really important. So, either it'll be in, like, a super secure, super guarded place in, like, the center of the castle, like the dungeon, or it's gonna be, like, in his room. Like, obviously, he's not keeping it in the kitchen. Like, let's use our brains, bestie love. Dorian transforms himself into a gnat and is doing some investigating of the basement. So imagine that in your brains. Visually, that was, like, hard for me to depict, so unfortunately you'll have to look at Dorian as a man. But he stumbles across this hallway that he's never been down before, and it has, like, spooky, ooky, bad vibes. It's, like, this hallway that leads to, like, this iron basement door. There are no guards along the hallway, but it smells really bad. It has a, like, signature, distinct, like, super heavy Valg scent. And so he's able to make it through the iron door at the end of the hallway, and it is this spooky, ooky room filled with a black sarcophagus in the center, and the walls are just lined with those wordstone collars that he wore when he was possessed by a Valg prince. And Dorian is having, like, a pretty substantial, like, PTSD flashback moment, seeing and kind of, like, feeling the, like, weight of all those collars. He's, like, not sure how they work. He's not sure if the Valg princes are, like, trapped inside the collar and, like, waiting for a host, or if they're, like, empty, and when they get put on a host, then the Valg princes, like, show up. Like, he doesn't know what the deal is, but he just, like, seeing all those colors is making him a little, like, panicky and a little anxious, obviously. He, like, quickly does, like, a search for the key, and it's, like, pretty clear that it's not in here. But he starts to, like, spiral. He's, like, really not in a great headspace mentally. He starts to really spiral about the fact that both Kaltain and his father were able to resist the pool of the Valg collars, but particularly his father, because his father really didn't have any magic, but was still able to resist this Valg collar. And Dorian has, like, pretty substantial magic, but was not really able to resist the Valg collar, except when he flirted with Manon. but in general, he was cool with it. Also, there were moments towards the end there where he was like starting to enjoy it, like where he'd spent so long in the collar that he'd started to enjoy the torture that he was witnessing via the Valg Prince. And he's like, maybe I am a little Valg. Not human, not entirely. Perhaps he didn't want to be. Perhaps he would just stay in another form forever. Perhaps he'd just submit. And so he's like, maybe I should just actually turn into a gnat and like die and fly away. Like he's like really spiraling down. And then a dark wind seeps out of the room and like tugs him out of there. He like freaks out. He thinks it's like Erwan for a second, but it's not. It is Maeve. And Maeve grabs his little gnat little face and says, she's holding him in the palm of her hand. And he's looking like a little gnat. And she says, "Stupid boy," Maeve hissed. The words were a thunderclap. He panted, the gnat's body shaking from wingtip to wingtip. One press of her finger and he'd be gone. He braced himself, waiting for it, but Maeve kept her palm open. As she began to walk down the hall, away from the sealed chamber, she said, "What you felt in there, that is why I left their world." She gazed ahead, a shadow darkening her face. "Every day, that is what I felt." Maeve and Dorian go back to Maeve's room, and Dorian is like puking in the corner. And Maeve is like, "What is your problem?" And Dorian is like, "Those collars." He ran a hand over his neck. "I didn't think it would affect me like that to see them again." And Maeve is like, "The collars can do nothing without a host, but that is a place of hatred and pain. The memory of it is like etched into the stones itself." Like you were just feeling kind of like the echoes of all of the terrible things that have happened in that room. And she's like, "It snared you. You let yourself be snared by that." And Dorian thinks to himself, hadn't Kaltain said nearly the same thing about the collars? And he just, like, it says in way of explanation to Maeve, "It took me by surprise." And then he says to her, "You would let your spiders endure those collars. Like, I've felt how terrible they are. And you say that you, like, love your spiders and that your spiders are your girls, but you're subjecting them to that." Maeve fell silent for a moment, and he could have sworn something like regret passed over her face. "I would not have done it unless my need to prove my loyalty compelled me." And they chat for like a while. Maeve explains that Erwan is like the mildest of the brothers. He is also the smartest though. So he is like tricky. He's like the least evil, but the smartest. And Dorian asked if she's ever had children, and she said, "No, that's gross. I like would never let my body bear Orcus's children because ew." And she also talks about like the Valg princes and princesses. Some of them are the children of like Erwan and Mantix and maybe even Orcus, but like also some of them are not, but none of them have like proved themselves good enough to be like the heirs. Like none of them have stepped up to be like another Valg king. And we also know that the princesses are fiercer than the princes. They like have stronger magic. They're tougher. They are more deadly, but they are much harder for a host to hold on to because of that like tenacity. And then they switch conversation topics, and Dorian says to Maeve, "Why did you take Aelin?" And Maeve says, "Because she would never agree to work with me, and she would have never protected me from Erwan or the Valg." And Dorian is like, "Okay, but like you seemed like you're doing actually pretty well for yourself. Why didn't you just protect yourself?" And Maeve says, "Because our kind only fear certain gifts. Mine, alas, are not those things. I usually keep another fey female with me, one who has powers that work against the Valg, different from those that Aelin Galthinius possesses. She swore the blood oath to me long ago, and has rarely left my side since. But I did not dare bring her to Morath. To have her here would not have convinced Erwan that I came in good faith. So you see, I'm as defenseless against Erwan as you are." And I think what she's talking about here is that owl that she's normally has with her, that like fey healer that like has the healing magic. The healing magic works equally well as the fire magic in terms of defeating the Valg. And so normally Maeve has that fey female healer with her, but she did not bring her to Morath because it would be not seen as a sign of good faith. And they talk about Erwan in his like true form, because Dorian is like, "Is that what Erwan like actually looks like?" And Maeve is like, "It's like pretty close to what he actually looks like. The thing is, you guys have souls that are like shapeless and just kind of like stuck in your body. Our souls have shapes like in themselves, and so like we can slip into skins, but like Erwan is like has like made a little outfit for himself, and like this is his preferred form. Like this is what he would kind of want to look like." And Dorian is like, "Okay, what would your like natural form be?" And Maeve is like, "You would literally hate it. It's the scariest thing you probably could ever dream of. I would give you nightmares." And Dorian's like, fair. And then they start talking about Dorian, because again, Dorian had this moment where he's like very concerned that he's a Valg boy. And Maeve asks him, Dorian asks Maeve, "Do you feel Valg or Fae?" "I am what I am." For a heartbeat, he could almost glimpse the weight of her eons of existence in her eyes. "But who do you wish to be?" A careful question. "Not like Erwan or his brothers. I never have." "That's not an answer." "Do you know who and what you wish to be?" A challenge and a genuine question. I'm figuring it out, Dorian said. And then Dorian is like, "Okay, so I've searched like literally every corner, every crevasse of this castle. and I can't find the key. It must be in Erewhon's tower. And Maeve is like, okay. And Dorian is like, okay, so I'm going to actually need you to go in there and get it. You're, like, the only person Erewhon's just going to, like, let in there willy-nilly. Like, if I show up and I'm like, hi, can I come in? He's going to be like, no, go away. Maeve says, to seduce and betray a king, one of the oldest tricks in the book, as you humans say. And Dorian is like, can Erewhon even be seduced by anyone? He could have sworn disgust flitted across her pale face before she said, he can. The girls in this series literally have to do everything. Literally everything. The girls are pulling their weight. Dorian can't even find the word key without a girly, and the girly is his enemy. And it does make me kind of sad. I, like, know Maeve is evil, okay? But then I see moments like this, and I'm also like, this is terrible too. Like, it is terrible that Maeve is reduced to, like, she is so powerful, and she is reduced to just, like, this body that the brothers are passing around and sharing between them. Ugh, hurts my feelings. Maeve goes to Erewhon in this, like, cutie little sheer little robe, and Dorian is like a little bug in the corner because he wants to watch the situation. Erewhon, still clad in his clothes, despite the late hour, lifted his brows. We have a meeting tomorrow, sister, because Maeve and Erewhon are supposed to meet in the morning. But Maeve showed up in the middle of the night, or not the middle of the night, but, like, in the evening, at his tower door. And Maeve takes a step closer. I did not come to discuss war. Erewhon stilled and then said to the guards, leave us. Because she's, like, clearly in, like, lingerie, okay? She's looking a little, like, risque. Okay? She's out in the town. And Erewhon says, you're my brother's wife. And Maeve is like, I don't have to be. And then she shakes her head and transforms into Aelin. Ew, this hurts. I don't like this at all. This is yucky. Yuck, 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 yuck. I was, like, really trying to be on Team Maeve there. I was on Team Maeve for a second. And then this happened. And I said, never mind, Maeve, that's gross. Please try to be at least a little bit of a girl's girl. Would that appeal to you? Maeve gave a half smile that Dorian had only seen on the Queen of Terrason's face. Disgust and horror roiled through him. He knew there was no true lust in Erewhon's eyes for Aelin, no true desire beyond the claiming the pain. No, thank you. Then she shifts again into Manon. Icy rage, pure and undiluted, tore through Dorian as Manon now stood before the avowed king. Or maybe this form, beautiful beyond all reckoning, she peered down at herself, smiling. Was she your intended queen when this war was over, the wing leader, or merely a prized breeding mare? Erewhon blinked, and that desire winked out. You are my brother's wife, he said, no matter whose skin you wear. Should you need release, I'll send someone to your chambers. And then he closes himself in the tower. And I do have to respect Erewhon for that. He might be evil, but he's not going to sleep with his brother's wife, and we have to respect that. We do have to respect that. The next morning, Maeve goes to her meeting that she was supposed to have with Erewhon all along, and she brings Dorian as a mouse in her pocket. I hope it looked like this. I imagine it was sneakier and subtler, but I hope it looked like this. I hope it was like a front pocket and Dorian's little mousy face was just sticking out. I don't think so, but that's in my imaginings what it is. And we learned that apparently, like 15 minutes after they left and got back to Maeve's room, a young man was sent to Maeve's room to, like, service her if necessary. She did turn them away, but Dorian is like, I think she only turned him away because I was here. Which, yeah, probably. You guys are engaged, so it would be rude if she slept with someone else in front of you. And Erewhon is like, you turned down that guy I sent you last night. That's kind of rude. I sent you a present. You didn't even accept it. And Maeve says, I had hoped for wine, Maeve said smoothly, not watered down ale. And Erewhon is like, the more I think about this, the more I'm like, this alliance seems unfair to me. Like, all you're giving me is 6 spiders. And I am, like, saving your little booty. You're the queen of no one and nothing. Like, and Maeve is like, okay, what do you want? If you want something else from me, let me know. And Erewhon is like, bring all the Karankui. Open a portal and transport them here. I want all the spiders. And Maeve's like, okay, well, not all of them will be such willing hosts. Like, I've been bringing the spiders that have, like, agreed to be hosts for the princesses, but not all of them are going to be into that vibe. And Erewhon says, not hosts, but soldiers. I do not intend to take chances. There will be no second phase of this war. Like, there will be one phase. We will wipe them out completely. And, like, I did decide that, like, having a bunch of spiders would be helpful. And Maeve is like, I'm not so sure. I actually, like, heard what happened in Enel with Aelin. How she, like, exploded you guys. And, I know that blast of power was actually intended for me. But, like, if she summons it again, let's say on a battlefield, I don't know if you'd be able to walk away, brother. And I think maybe we shouldn't put all of our eggs in one basket. And Erewhon is like, okay, well, that's why I need your spiders to, like, shore up our defenses. And Maeve is like, perhaps, but do not forget that you and I could win without the spiders, without the princesses. Even Aelin Galathinius could not stand against us both. We could go north and obliterate her, keep the spiders in reserve for other kingdoms, other times. And beyond that, you know much about walking between worlds, but not everything. Like, I could also teach you some stuff. And Erewhon's like, okay. I suppose I will only find out, like, what you know when you and I have won this war. Like, I don't think you'll tell me before that. And Maeve is like, yes, of course. Although I'm willing to give you a display tomorrow. I give you a little demonstration. I, like, can't open a portal to, like, bring your brothers through. Like, they are, like, too strong and powerful. I can't hold a portal open long enough between the worlds to, like, pull them through. But we can look at them. We can, like, say, hey guys. Just for, like, a quick moment, we could, like, open a portal. You could look at your brothers. And everyone is, like, very interested in that proposition. Back in Orynth, Aedion is wandering around in his tower, just, like, forlorn. And Ren comes back for him, and Aedion is just, like, thinking about the past and thinking about, like, him and Ren growing up in this place together and their, like, rivalry that they kind of had when they were younger, and how everything just, like, so quickly fell apart. Like, one summer they were, like, playing as boys, and the next summer they were, like, at war. And Ren is, like, chatting with him, and Ren is like, okay, well, I would get the archers sorted all out today. We'll, like, figure out what we're doing with the archers and ensure the soldiers that are holding the gate know how to wield the hot boiling oil that we will pour on people. And Aedion's like, do you know how to wield the hot boiling oil? Have you done that before? And Ren is like, I think there's not that much to learn. You dump a giant cauldron over the side of the walls. Damage done. Like, it's pretty simple. And Aedion is like, we need to talk about Rolf. Okay. That's vague and confusing. We'll probably find out what they're doing later. Meanwhile, Lysandra is out doing something sneaky business as well. She is in badger form. She's she's like a pretty large badger, and she's out with the silent assassins in this, like, field just outside of Orynth, being, like, super sneaky, and they're digging some pits. Then that night, everyone is in the towers, like, watching as Morath's troops arrive through one of the windows. Ansel is, like, counting out the men as they, like, appear over the horizon. And she's like, there's 10,000 men, 20,000, 30,000. 50,000 men is when they stop counting, because that's when the witch towers become visible on the horizon. There are 3 of them that are coming over the horizon. And Evangeline is with them up on this tower, and she says, I did not think it would be so terrible, Evangeline whispered, hands digging into Lysandra's heavy cloak. I did not think it would be so wretched. Lysandra is, like, holding her and, like, presses a kiss to the top of her head and is like, nothing is going to happen to you. Like, you will be totally safe. You will be fine. We will make sure of it. And Evangeline says, I am not afraid for myself, but for my friends. And they watch as these witch towers are pulled across that field. And that field is actually where Lysandra was earlier today, digging those holes. And so as they across that field, the trenches essentially were filled with, like, bombs, essentially. Dynamite, maybe? Hellfire? I don't know, something spooky and explosive. And there are silent assassins that are archers up in the mountains around, and they shoot not for the people that are approaching the field, but for these bombs. As soon as the witch towers are above the trenches, they explode them. And they are able to knock out 2 of the towers, which is, like, great. We were so excited. 1 tower is still remaining, though, and, like, honestly, that's enough to decimate them. On top of the fact that Ansel is counting, and Ansel gives them a final count of 100,000 men approaching this army. Back to our favorite engaged couple, Dorian and Maeve. Dorian and Maeve are back in Maeve's room to kind of, like, recap the little meeting that Maeve and Erwan just had. And Dorian is like, can you really show Erwan, like, a different world? Is that really possible? And Maeve is like, you have seen yourself the power of witch mirrors, what it did to Aelin, Galathinius, and Manon Blackbeak. Who do you think taught the witches such powers? Not the Fae, a small laugh. And how do you think I have been able to see so far? Hear voices of my eyes all the way from Dorinel. There are mirrors to spy, to travel, to kill. Even now, Erwan wields them to his advantage with the iron teeth. Maeve lounged, a queen with no crown. I can show him what he wishes to see. And Dorian is like, oh my gosh, you're going to trick him. You're going to spin an illusion. You don't plan to show him Orcus or Marcus Mantics at all. And Maeve is like, yeah, a sleight of hand while you enter the tower. Like, I don't know why you're so upset about it. Like, why do you care? And Dorian is like, why am I going to the tower? I, like, can't get in there. And Maeve is like, I am a world walker. I have traveled between universes. Do you think moving between worlds would be so hard? Like, come on, Dorian. I can get you in that tower. And we learned that the only place she can't really portal herself into, or one of the only places, is Terrasen, because Brannon found out about her gifts centuries ago and has, like, woven, like, spells and wards over the whole country of Terrasen, so she can only walk into Terrasen. She can't portal herself in. And Dorian is like, why didn't we just portal into his tower from the start? This seems like we wasted a lot of time, Miss Maeve. And Maeve is like, because I had not yet decided it was worth the risk, because he had not yet pushed me to bring my handmaidens here, to be mere foot soldiers. And then Dorian's like, you care about them, the spiders. He says, you will find, your majesty, that a loyal friend is a rare thing indeed. They are not so easy to sacrifice. I love that Maeve loves her spiders. She's like, those are my girls. And Dorian's like, okay, you say that, but you did offer 6 of them up to be princesses. And Maeve says, and I shall remember that for as long as I live, Maeve said. And some kernel of emotion indeed danced over her face. They went willingly, I tell myself that. Whenever I look upon them and see nothing of the creatures I knew, they wish to help me. Her eyes met his. Not all Valg are evil. Dorian. Erewhon is. Yes, she said, her eyes darkened. He and his brothers, they're the worst of our kind. Their rule through fear and pain, they delight in such things. And you do not. Maeve twirled an inky strand around a finger and did not answer. Fine, Dorian went on. So you shall break past Erewhon's wards on his room, open the portal for me, and I shall slip in while you distract him with an illusion about his brothers. He frowned. As soon as I find the key, he'll know that you've deceived him. We'll have to leave quickly. Her mouth curved. We will. And go wherever you have hidden the others. Dorian kept every expression off his face. You're certain he won't know that he's being tricked? Orcus is his brother, Maeve says, but Orcus was also my husband. The illusion will be real enough. Dorian considered this. What time do we make our move? Nightfall. As soon as nightfall hits. Love this. I think it's so fun. Maeve is evil, but she is a good time. That night, Dorian uses the portal that Maeve sets up for him to go into the bedroom. As soon as she leaves to go meet with Erewhon, he gives it like a minute or two, goes to this portal. He has transformed himself into Erewhon. So unless Erewhon himself comes through that bedroom door, Dorian will be like safe. If like one of the guards comes in, he'll be like, hi, I'm Erewhon. I can do whatever I want. This is my bedroom. And so he gets in and he starts like searching through the closets, starts searching through the doors, and he's just like digging through everything. He's not finding anything yet. But then he hears a little noise coming from the bed. And there is an emaciated woman lying in the bed that like literally could have been Kaltain's twin. Like they look literally identical. And he's just blown away by how bad she looks. Like she is so thin and just like bruised everywhere. Just like looks terrible. And Dorian realizes pretty quickly that the key is inside of her arm. Dorian is so horrified by her state, and also by the knowledge that she has been forced to share Erewhon's bed. And he's thinking about Kaltain this whole time and what Kaltain had to endure, and he does feel like partially responsible for this. He's like very minimally responsible for what happened to Kaltain, but he does feel like he could have saved her. He asked that girl to like sit up, and he says, give me your arm. He nearly staggered back at the festering wound, the black veins running up from it, leaking its poison into her. What Kaltain's wound had no doubt looked like, and why her scar had remained even in death. And Dorian's like, okay. And he takes a knife and he starts digging around on her arm for the word key, all the while like trying to send healing magic into her to like make sure that she's not in pain. But like she's like, I don't think she's comfy. I don't think she's comfortable. He's not like sending her quite enough to like totally numb her from this. He's able to like get the word key out of her arm. And as soon as the word key is out of her arm, this girl starts begging Dorian to kill her. And Damaris, the sword that warms up when people are telling the truth, is warm. Like, it is like she's not lying. She, like, really would like death. Like, death would be better than her current condition. Dorian knows he can't bring her with him. Like, there's no way for him to, like, rescue her and deal with what he needs to deal with Maeve and, like, get back to the witches or to Aelin. I don't know where he's planning on going next. He's kind of, like, at a loss at what he's supposed to do. Because he remembers what it was like to be in that collar and knows that death may be a mercy. Manon would have ended it, freed her in the only way left. Chaol would have taken her with him and damned the consequences. Aelin, he didn't know what she would have done. Who did you wish to be? He was not any of them. He was nothing but himself. A man who had known loss and pain, yes, but a man who had known friendship and joy. The loss and the pain, they had not broken him wholly. Without them, would the moments of happiness be as bright? Without them, would he fight so hard to ensure it did not happen again? Who do you wish to be? A king worthy of his crown. A king who would rebuild what had been shattered, both within himself and his lands. I love Dori so much. But before Dorian can make any decision about what he wants to do about this girl, whether he wants to try to save her, do, whatever Dorian is going to do, whatever he wishes to be, Maeve appears and snaps the girl's neck. She says, consider it a wedding gift, Majesty. She said, her lip curling, to spare you from that decision. And then immediately, Dorian gets, like, tangled up in Maeve's web. Like, as soon as he's able to retrieve the word key, Maeve has, like, spun into his mind and kind of, like, ensnared him. And she's like, the key, if you will. And then we shall retrieve the others, she continued, and beckoned to the portal through which they had both come. He followed her, pulling the shard from his pocket. Such things I have planned for us, Majesty, for our union. With the keys, I could keep you eternally young, and with your power, second to none, not even Aelin Galathinius, you will shield us from any who might try to return to this world again. They emerged back into their bedroom, and with a swipe of Maeve's hand, the portal disappeared. Quickly now, she ordered him, we depart. The wyvern awaits. Dorian halted in the middle of the chamber. Don't you think it's rude to leave without a note? A trap within a trap, one he had formed from the moment he had seen her, had been a simple trick, to shift his mind as if he were shifting his body, to make her sing one thing when she glimpsed inside it, to make her see what she wished to believe, his jealousy and resentment of Aelin. His desperation, his naive foolishness, he'd let his mind become such things, let it lure her in, and every time she'd come close, falling for those slips in his power, his magic had studied her own, just as it had studied Cyrene's stolen kernel of shapeshifting, so it had learned Maeve's abilities, to creep into the mind, to seize it. It had only been a matter of waiting for her to make her move, to let her lay the trap she'd closed to seal him to her forever. And so Dorian has trapped her in his magic using kind of Maeve's own tricks. And so he's able to talk to her mind to mind because she's ensnared. Her brain is ensnared, and so this conversation is happening with their brains. You hurt my friend, he said with a lethal calm. It will not be so very difficult to end you for it. Is this the king you wish to be? Maeve says. Torturing a helpless female? He laughed again. You are not helpless, and if I could, I would seal you in an iron box for eternity. Dorian is heard a little bit of what you did to Aelin, and Aelin is my girl. We had a book club together in book 1, and since then she's in my ride or die. Okay? And so I would never partner up with you in any real capacity. Okay. He had to go quickly. But he still said, the king I wish to be is the opposite of what you are. He gave Maeve a smile. And there is only one which will be my queen. People die over this line. And I do think it's pretty slay. Dorian knows how to drop a bar. Then the tower starts to shake. It's shaking like there's an earthquake going on. And Dorian says, you did not think I spent all of my time searching, did you? Because actually, while he was having his Eras Tour Dorian edition, he was going through the tower and lacing bits of his magic into the cracks in the foundation of this place. Finding any weak spots and just putting a bit of his magic in them. But he set it up so that the whole tower won't collapse until the servant areas where the humans live, they'll be able to escape safely, and those areas won't collapse until they are gone. But the areas that are just full of Valg and Erewhon and stuff, collapsed, gone-a-roo. Bye-bye. Maeve is, meanwhile, begging for Dorian to help her, not to leave her here, because if she's here, trapped in Dorian's magic and Erewhon comes for her, it's over. It's over for her. And Dorian thinks to himself, he should let Erewhon find her, doom her to the life she had intended for him, for Aelin. Maeve curled over on her knees, her mind and power contained, waiting in despair for the Dark King whom she tried so hard to escape, or for the shuddering fortress to collapse around her. He knew he'd regret it, knew he should kill her, but to condemn her to what he'd endured, he would not wish it upon anyone, even if it cost him this war. And he did not think that made him weak, not at all. He says, this is the kind of king I wish to be. And so Dorian leaves, and he I don't know what form he leaves the palace in, but eventually he turns into wyvern form as he's soaring away from Morath. All 3 word keys in his pockets. Again, I don't know how he has pockets, okay? He's a wyvern right now. He has pockets, he has a sword, he has an outfit. I don't know. Maybe he's a kangaroo wyvern and he keeps it all in his pouch. And as he's flying away, he severs the chain, or the tether that binds him to Maeve that has tied her powers up. But as he does that, he also ties off her ability to world walk, to walk through portals. He doesn't allow her to access that portion of her magic. He gets rid of that. World walker no longer, he said, as his raw magic shifted her own, changed its very essence. I suggest you invest in a good pair of walking shoes. Hilarious. We love sassy Dorian. As he flies away, Morath's towers crumble to the ground behind him. Meanwhile, back at the camp, we're in Irene's POV, and she's kind of talking about what this journey has been like. She is not loving this hike through the Ferian Gap. Girly is not an outdoorsy girl, okay? She's an insidey girl, and we love that for her. Both armies have been reunited in the Ferian Gap since the witches weren't there. They just met up in the Ferian Gap, and now they're all hiking together. Elide has been helping Irene with the healing a lot. Right now she is helping this guy who got an infection. He had an injury from the battle that he didn't see healers for, and now has gotten infected. He fell off his horse. They're kind of tending to him. Irene is explaining how her magic works and how she can sweep it through a body and use it to diagnose, but also to kind of directly interact with these diseases and illnesses and kind of manage them. It can sweep through, it interacts with their illnesses and injuries as if they were living creatures. Irene explains, with their own secrets and temperaments. You sometimes just have to outsmart them just as you would any foe. These, like, essentially, like, tiny battles. And then Irene, like, turns and throws up in a little bucket next to her. Irene held up a hand, wiping her mouth with the other. As joyful as it is to know that I soon shall be a mother, the realities of the first few months are not so joyous. Our Elide is kind of limping around, and Irene is like, hey, I could heal your leg, you know. And Elide is like, really? And Irene is like, yeah, can I actually, like, see it? I would like to examine the injury, and I could give you, like, a better assessment of, like, what that would look like. Irene, like, you know, Elide and Irene sit down, and Elide, like, shows her leg. And Irene is immediately, like, blown away by, like, the cruelty of this injury and the pain that this Elide as a child must have had to endure after this injury and the way it healed, and just how, like, brutal and painful that must have been. And Irene explains, like, what that process would look like. She's like, the process of healing this leg would be incredibly painful and would take probably about 3 weeks to do. Essentially, I would need to completely, like, deconstruct and reconstruct your leg. The bones are so, like, misshapen at this point that I would just, like, need to essentially build you a new leg inside of you. It would be a very long and painful recovery, and we also don't have time for it until after, like, this war is done, because it is such, like, an intensive process, but, like, it is something that we can do. Option 2, another option, is that we, like, get you a salve for the pain that will, like, help you just kind of, like, manage the pain, but it actually won't do anything to prevent this injury from getting worse, and it will get worse. Your bones are directly, like, grinding on each other, so as the years progress, you are going to be in more and more pain. Arthritis is already starting to build up in these joints and in these bones. And within the next 5 to 10 years, the salve will literally do nothing. It will not touch the pain anymore because it will be so severe. And Elide is like, I don't know if I can face the pain of this injury again. Because essentially what Irene is saying is, like, we're going to have to re-injure your leg in the same way that it was injured before. And Elide's like, I don't know if I could face that again. And Irene is like, for sure, like, I understand that. With that sort of injury, with an injury this severe, it would require facing a great many things inside yourself. Not only this, like, the pain, but just, like, the trauma. She smiled towards the wagon entrance. My husband and I went through such a journey together. And Elide asks, was it hard? And Irene says, incredibly. But he did it. We did it. But before they can kind of, like, continue chatting, they, like, step outside the tent, and Bort is there. She's, like, there, and Irene assumes that she wants to talk to her. She assumes there's some healer need, but she's like, no, I need to actually speak to Elide. You are to come with me, she says to Elide. Behind the girl, Arcus waited, a sparrow perched on the saddle, falcon and Nar, not a companion, Irene realized, but an additional guard. And Elide's like, what's wrong? Bort shifted with impatience or nerves. Irene couldn't tell. They found someone in the mountains. They want you up there to decide what to do with them. And Irene says, who? And Bort says, her uncle. Uncle Vernon is in the Ferian Gap. Elide then climbs on the rook with Bort. She's gonna throw up. She's like, do you think they will hate me forever if I throw up all over this rook? Because I'm not having a great time. I want to be on the ground. I don't even want to, like, as tall as I want to be, if I can't reach it sitting on top of Lorcan's shoulders, I don't want to, it's not for me, you know? Like, that's as tall as I think Elide's willing to go. Casually. Bort explains that they found him hiding amongst the wyvern trainers, like he had been pretending to be a wyvern trainer that had been, because remember, the Ferian Gap was, like, mostly empty, except there were a few trainers of these wyverns. And Aelin sent for you immediately when we found him. She arrives there, and Gabrielle and Fenris are, like, waiting for her at the entrance to the, like, caves in the Ferian Gap, and they're like, okay, come on back. They walk her through the tunnels of this place. One of them is like, okay, he's just up here again, and Elide starts shaking at the thought of, like, seeing him again. And Fenris says to her, like, he's well restrained, like, it's okay. Puts a hand on her shoulder and is like, he's well restrained. And as they kind of turn down the hallway, Lorcan and Aelin are waiting for Elide outside of a closed door. And then further down the hall, she can see Sartak and Nezran and Kale. And Lorcan says to Elide, Lorcan's gray face was frozen with rage, his depthless eyes like frigid pools of night, as he said quietly, you don't need to go in there. And then Aelin goes on, we have brought you here, she said, her own face the portrait of restrained wrath, so you could choose what to do with him, if you do wish to speak to him before we do. And Elide is like, do you mean to torture him for information? And Lorcan is like, yeah, we will do that first, and then we will give him what he deserves. Lorcan is literally like, I'm going to murder this man so slowly, it might take me like a few weeks. We're going to torture him for information, and then I'm going to kill him slowly. Don't even worry about it, girlie. Elide glanced between the male she loved and the queen she had served, and her limp had never felt so pronounced, so obvious as she took a step closer. Why is he here? Rowan is like, he actually hasn't said yet. He's, like, not told us anything. He's actually been, like, quite uncooperative. But, like, at the end of the day, the call is yours. You are the one who is directing the situation. If you say, like, kill him right now, like, we'll send Lorcan in there with a hatchet off with his head. If you say torture him for a few weeks, Lorcan is up for it. Like, you are the boss of this situation. And Elide is like, will you kill him regardless? Like, regardless of what he says. And Lorcan is like, what do you wish us to do? Like, again, you are the boss of this situation. And Elide is like, I would like to speak to him first. Like, before we make any decisions, I would like to have a chat with him. And she gets in there, and Vernon is tied to a chair. And he's, like, chained pretty strongly. Like, he's not going anywhere. And his face is also covered in blood. Like, it's very clear that his nose has been broken. And Elide looks behind her, and Lorcan's fist is covered in blood. Lorcan did punch him in the face and break his nose. And he would do it again. Okay? He would do it again happily. In fact, he might do it again just for fun. And then Vernon says to Elide, what mighty company you keep these days. And Elide is like, why are you here? Vernon makes some snide comments, and Elide's like, your breaths are limited. I would suggest you use them wisely. Ruthless, Vernon smirked. The witch blood in your vein ran true after all. Yeah, effing dead. That's a witchling right there. That's a little witchling. She might be tiny. She might not have any magic in her blood, but that's a witch. That is a witch, tried and true. Elide is like, why? Why did you do any of this? Like, why did you partner with Erewhon? Like, why? And Vernon explains that essentially he was, like, jealous of his brother. He was like, my brother got everything, and it wasn't fair. Like, he was just, like, a brute of a man. But it seems like you have the same taste as your mother, like, pointing at Lorcan. He's just, like, mean and nasty, and we don't love the vibes. Enough, Elide said softly, but not weakly. She took another step towards him. So you were jealous of my father. Jealous of his strength, his talent, of his wife. Vernon opened his mouth, but Elide lifted a hand. I am not done yet. I do not care why you are here. I do not care what they plan to do to you. But I want you to know that once I walk away from this room, I will never think of you again. Your name will be erased from Orynth, from Terrasen, from Ardelane. There will never be a whisper of you, nor any reminder. You will be forgotten. Vernon paled, just slightly. Then he smiled. Erased from Orynth. You say that as if you do not know, Lady Elide. He leaned forward as much as his chains would allow. Orynth now lies at the hands of Morath. Your city has been sacked. The words rippled through her like a blow, and even Lorcan sucked in a breath. Vernon leaned back, smug as a cat. Go ahead and erase me then. With the rubble, it will not be hard to do. And then Elide turns to the door, and Vernon's like, well, that's it? And Elide is like, what else could I have to say to you? I'm done talking to you. And Vernon's like, no, you did not ask me for the details. Another snake smiles. You still have not learned to play the game, Elide. Elide returned his smile with one of her own. There is nothing more that I care to hear from you. She glanced towards Lorcan and Aelin, towards their companions gathered in the hall. But they still have questions. Like, I'm actually done with you, but, like, my besties back there, I'm sure they have some more questions for you. And I'm gonna let them ask however they would like. Vernon's face was the color of spoiled milk. You mean to leave me in their hands, utterly defenseless? And Elide goes, I was defenseless. When you let my leg remain unhealed, she said, a steady sort of calm settling over her. I was a child then, and I survived. You are a grown man. She let her lips curl into another smile. We'll see if you do too. She didn't try to hide her limp as she strode out, as she caught Lorcan's eyes and beheld the pride gleaming there. Not a whisper, not one whisper from that voice who had guided her. Not from fear, but perhaps she did not need a Neath, lady of wise things. Perhaps the goddess had known she herself was not needed. Not anymore. Now they're out in the hallway and they're like chatting about what they should do next. And Aelin looks over at Lorcan and knows that like the moment Aelin is like, okay, rip out his throat, gone. That man is dead. Unless he like wanted to spend a few minutes breaking some bones or screening him alive as Rowan had done with Cairn. Like Lorcan is ready to beat that man up. But as they, like, gather in the hallway, Elide is like, I don't care what you do with him. Like, he's your problem now, honestly. And Lorcan says, do you care if he walks out alive? Like, do you care if we kill him? Elide studied the male whose heart she held. The most apt description I've ever heard of Lorcan. No. Good. Aelin almost said. Elide added, but make it quick. Lorcan opened his mouth. Elide shook her head. My father would wish it so. Aelin thinks of Kaltain, and how she promised Kaltain that she would punish them all. And she knows that this man is included because she has heard from Elide that Kaltain was used and brutalized by everyone in Morath, her uncle included. And Rowan says, we need to question him first, see what he knows. Then do it, Elide said. But when it is time, make it quick. Quick, Fenris mused, but not painless. Elide's face was cold, unyielding. You can decide. Lorcan smiles, and his answer is clear. Lorcan's like, okay, quick, annoying, but we can do it. Painless? Literally never. And then Aelin's like, okay, so here's the thing. I don't think torture is going to get anything out of him. Like, it is not his vibe. Vernon likes to play games, and we will play. And, like, this is partially true, but we can also see, like, Rowan and Aelin are, like, kind of having, like, a side interaction over here. And we can tell that Rowan knows that part of it is because she feels that, like, torture won't be super effective on Vernon, but also part of it is because she does not want to go back to that place. She does not want to become like Karn, like, inflicting this torture on this man. Even though he deserves it. Obviously. He does. He's terrible. We hate him. But the thought of having to endure torture, even being on the other side of it, is, like, a little bit too triggering for Aelin. And so he says so Rowan, kind of seeing this on Aelin, says, okay, see what you can get out of him, Rowan says to her instead. Lorcan whirled, mouth opening, but Rowan snarled, we can decide here and now what we wish to be as a court. Do we act like our enemies, or do we find alternative methods of breaking them? Like, we are making the decisions now that will define us as a court, and are we a court where torture is cool? We have to make that decision. And Aelin is like, okay, well, we'll see. We'll do it my way first. You can still kill him, Lorcan. Don't worry. But we're going to try it my way first. Lorcan didn't object when she said, we need some ale. Then they go inside. Aelin and Vernon are going to have some ale. Lorcan and Rowan are having to sit outside because those boys are just, like, they're too, in the words of Crescent City, they're too big of alpha holes to be inside, okay? They can't be inside. But we have Fenris and Gabriel in there in case something were to go bad. But, like, Vernon is really not, like, a physical threat, okay? Like, he doesn't have magic. Aelin could literally snap his neck without, like, even breaking a sweat. And anyway, she passes the ale to him, and she's like, it's not poisoned. It would kind of defeat the purpose if it was. Vernon took a small sip of the ale. I suppose you think plying me with ale and talking to me like we're steadfast friends will get you what you want to know. And Aelin's like, okay, I mean, would you prefer the alternative? We can bring in the torturer. Lorcan is literally itching to break some of your bones, so, like, if you would prefer that, we can definitely do that. But she's like, I would prefer not to have to do that, but, like, you're in charge. Vernon's like, the methods may differ, but the end results will be the same. And Aelin says, tell me something interesting, Vernon, and maybe it will change. His eyes swept over her. Had I known you'd grown to such a queen, perhaps I would not have bothered to kneel for Ardeling. They go back and forth. Aelin being like, seems like Erwan doesn't want you anymore. Like, why did he drop you here? And Vernon's like, maybe he put me here for a reason. And Aelin's like, I kind of don't think so. And then Aelin says, again, tell me something interesting and perhaps I'll let you live. Do you swear it on your throne that you shall not kill me? A glance towards Fenris and Gabriel, stone-faced behind her, nor any of your companions. Aelin snorted. I was hoping you'd hold out longer before showing your hands. She drained the rest of her ale. But yes, I swear that neither me nor any of my companions will kill you, if you tell us what you know. Vernon drank deeply from his ale and then said, Maeve has come to Morath. Aelin was glad she was sitting. She kept her face bored, bland, to see Erwan, to unite with him. Aelin is, like, literally reeling at this news. This is her worst case scenario. These are the two opposing enemy forces. And now they seemingly have teamed up, and she, like, you know, is immediately like, there's literally no way that I'm able to fight them at once. But she's trying to play it cool. And Aelin is like, did she bring her army with her when she came to Morath? And Vernon is like, no, she didn't bring anyone that I saw. And Aelin is like, okay, cool. Did you learn what they plan to do? Like, any of their plans? And Vernon is like, yeah, I mean, I think their plan is to, like, fight you, I guess. But Vernon actually doesn't know that much about, like, what Erwan is up to. But we do learn that the Iron Teeth have been called to Terrasen to fight. That's why they're no longer at the Ferian Gap, because they're being called to Terrasen. 100,000 soldiers march on Orynth, Vernon said, chuckling. Will that fire of yours be enough to stop them? Aelin put a hand on Goldrin's hilt, her heart thundering. How far are they from the city? Vernon shrugged. They were already within a few days' march when the Iron Teeth Legion left here. Aelin calculated the distance, the terrain, the size of her own army. They were 2 weeks away at best, if the weather didn't hinder them. 2 weeks through dense forest and enemy territory. They'd never make it in time. Do Maeve and Erwan go to join them? I'd assume so, not with the initial group for reasons I was not told, but they will go to Orynth and face you there. And then Aelin stands up and turns to leave. And Vernon's like, don't you have more questions for me? And Aelin is like, I have everything I need to know. Fenris and Gabriel come in and start chaining Vernon back up. And he's like, wait, no. Aren't you going to unchain me? I, like, told you what you told me, what you asked for. And Aelin said, I said literally nothing about unchaining you. I said I wouldn't kill you. It's not our fault if you can't get out of those chains, is it? Aelin said quietly, you chained and locked my friend in a tower for 10 years. Let's see how you enjoy the experience. She let her smile turn vicious. Though once the trainers here are dealt with, I don't think there will be anyone left to feed you or bring you water or even to hear your screaming, so I doubt you'll make it to 10 years before the end claims you. But 2 days? 3? I can accept that, I think. Please, Vernon said, as Gabrielle reached for the door handle to seal the man inside. Marion saved my life, Aelin said, holding the man's gaze, and you bowed gleefully to the man who killed her. Perhaps even told the king of Ardaline where to find us, all of us. And Vernon, continues pleading as Aelin walks back out into the hallway and locks the door behind her. Silence filled the hall. Aelin met Elide's wide-eyed gaze. Lorcan savagely satisfied at her side. It won't be quick this way, Aelin said, extending the key to Elide. The rest of the question hung there. Vernon kept screaming, pleading for them to come back to unchain him. Elide studied the sealed door, the desperate man behind it. The Lady of Parenth took the outstretched key, pocketed it. We should find a better way to seal that room. Slay. Yeah. Elide was like, make sure it's quick. My dad would want that. But, honestly, Dad's not here. Because you know why? That man killed him. Aelin and Rowan have a little chat out on one of the balconies in the Ferian Gap. And Aelin says to Rowan, our worst fears have been confirmed. And Rowan says, we will face them together. Maeve and Erewhon. Aelin, what about the 100,000 soldiers marching on Orynth? Together, Fireheart, was all he said. She found only centuries of training and cool calculation within his face. That unbreakable will, she rested her head against his shoulder, her temple digging into the light armor. Will we make it? Will there be anything left at all? He brushed the hair from her face. We will try. That is the best we can do. The words of a commander who had walked on and off killing fields for centuries. I don't know what to do, she said silently. He kissed the top of her head together. And as the wind howled through the peaks, Aelin realized that her mate, perhaps, did not have a solution either. We're back in Orynth with the boys. Dinner at the castle of Orynth is super somber that night. They know Erewhon's troops are descending. They're gonna have to fight in the morning, and they're just bracing for that. 2 of the silent assassins were killed in the aftermath of the explosions. Because remember the archers were up in those mountains, and 2 of them were killed, but not more. And bummer about the 2 that were killed, but things could have been worse. Ren heaved out a long breath as they're Aedion and Ren are sitting in the great room together. This is it, isn't it? There's no one left to come to our aid. It won't be a pretty end, Aedion admitted, leaning against the mantle, especially once they get that 3rd tower operational again. You should get some rest. And Ren is like, what about you? Aedion just stared into the flame. It would have been an honor, Ren said, to serve in this court with you. Aedion shut his eyes, swallowing hard. It would have been an honor indeed. That hurts my feelings. Guys, we're getting to the bad part. I hope you had fun with the flirty times with Maeve and Dorian, because that was the only fun that we were going to get to have this chapter. This part. Aedion is headed to bed finally when he bumps into Lysandra in the hallway, and she's holding a steaming mug of milk. And Lysandra explains for Evangeline, she said, she can't sleep. The girl had been shaking all day, had looked like she'd vomit right at the table, and Aedion only asked, can I speak to her? Lysandra is about to say no. Aedion can see that, but then she changes her mind last minute and brings Aedion with her up to Evangeline's room. I brought you some milk, Lysandra announced, barely winded from the climb, and some company. Aedion sits on the edge of her bed, and Aedion starts to talk to Evangeline, and he says, before my first battle, Aedion said to the girl, I spent the entire night in the privy. Evangeline squeaked, you? Aedion smirked. Oh, yes. Quinn, the old captain of the guard, said it was a wonder I had anything left inside me by the time dawn broke. Evangeline let out a little laugh. That's disgusting. It certainly was, Aedion said. Could have sworn Lysandra was smiling a bit. So you are already much braver than I was. I threw up earlier, Evangeline whispered. Aedion said in a conspiratorial whisper, better than shitting your pants, sweetheart. Evangeline let out a belly laugh that made her clutch to the cup to keep from spilling. Aedion grinned and ruffled her red golden hair. The battle won't be pretty, he said, as Evangeline sipped her milk, and you will likely throw up again. But just remember that this fear of yours, it means that you have something worth fighting for, that you care so greatly for that. Losing it is the worst thing you can imagine. He pointed to the frost-covered windows. Those bastards out there on the plain, they have none of that. He laid his hand on hers and squeezed gently. They have nothing to fight for. And while we may not have their numbers, we do have something worth defending. And because of that, we can overcome our fear. We can fight against them to the very end. For our friends, for our family. He squeezed her hand again at that. For those we love. He dared to look up at Lysandra, whose green eyes were lined with silver. For those we love, we can rise above that fear. Remember that tomorrow. Even if you throw up, even if you spend the whole night in the privy, remember that we have something to fight for. And it will always triumph. Evangeline nodded. I will. Aedion ruffled her hair once more and walked to the door. Pausing on the threshold, he met Lysandra's stare, her eyes emerald bright. I lost my family 10 years ago. Tomorrow I will fight for the new one I have made. Not only for Terrasen and its court and its people, but for the 2 ladies in this room. I wanted it to be you in the end. He almost spoke her words then, almost said them back to Lysandra as something like sorrow and longing entered her face. Okay. Did I cry over Aedion's little speech? Yeah, okay, I did. Was I yelling at him last week? Yeah, I was. Of course, people grow and change. And this little speech cracks me open. I can be swayed pretty easily. It doesn't take much. The next morning, she's up, she's braiding Evangeline's hair, and she regrets not following Aedion the night before. She regrets not following him and, like, telling him that, you know, like, she loved him. But, you know, it's time for war, and she doesn't have time. And they head to breakfast, but they're stopped by Darrow before they can get down there. Darrow, can I have a word? It will only take a minute. And, I mean, Lysander, you know, not really into that because he was not very nice to her. Not nice to her at all. You know, they listen, they go in, and they go into the study, and it's just, like, full of crumbling books. Apparently these are all the texts that he was able to save from Ardelane after the king's death, after Terrasen was taken over by Ardelane. Darrow says, a fool's optimism, the remains of a once great civilization. Lysandra looks over and is, like, looking around the room, and she sees, encased in crystal, the one blossom of Kingslayer. Aelin and Aedion had told her the legendary flower, which had bloomed across the mountains and fields the day Brandon had set foot on this continent, proof of the peace he brought with him. And since those ancient days, only single blossoms had been spotted, so rare that their appearance was deemed a sign that the land had blessed whatever ruler sat on Terrasen's throne, that the kingdom was truly at peace. The one entombed in crystal on Darrow's desk, Aelin had said, had appeared during Orlan's reign. Orlan, Darrow's lifelong love. The Master of Scholars grabbed the books when Ardelane was invaded, Darrow said. Smiling sadly at the king's flame, I grabbed this. The Antler throne, the crown, all of it destroyed, save for this one treasure, as great as any belonging to the Galathinius household. It's very beautiful, Evangeline said, coming up to the desk, but it's also pretty small. Lysandra could have sworn the old man's lips twitched towards a smile. It is indeed, Darrow said, and so are you. Darrow then turns to Evangeline and is like, hey, I'm gonna need someone to act as my messenger during the battle to, like, bring me messengers from, you know, various parts of the castle. I shall need someone with a fearless heart and a steady hand to help me. Are you that person? Evangeline didn't look up to Lysandra again. I am, she said, chin lifting. Darrow smiled slightly. Then head down to the Great Hall. Eat your breakfast, and when you return here, there shall be armor waiting for you. Evangeline's eyes widened at the mention of armor, with no trace of fear dimming them. And then Lysandra turns to Evangeline and is like, I'll be done with you in a minute, okay? I'll meet you down there. Evangeline is gone. Lysandra turns to Darrow and is like, why? Why would you ask her of that? And Darrow says, Nox Owens is of no use to me now that his allegiance has been made clear and apparently has vanished the gods nowhere, likely at Aedion's request. He turned the crystal over at his thin fingers. But beyond that, no child should have to watch as her friends are cut down. Keeping her busy, giving her a purpose and some small power will be better than locking her in the North Tower, scared out of her wits at every horrible sound and death. Lysandra did not smile, did not bow her head. You would do this for the ward of a whore? Darrow set down the crystal. It is the faces of children that I remember the most from 10 years ago, even more than Orlan's. And Evangeline's face yesterday as she looked out at that army. It was the same despair I saw back then, so you may think me a champion bastard, as Aedion would say, but I am not so heartless as you might believe. He nodded towards the open doorway. I will keep an eye on her. And then Lysandra just says thank you. Aedion's on the battlements. Morinth is close. They'll be within archer's range in an hour. Against 100,000 troops, they might stand to only thin the lines, but to let the enemy charge unchallenged at the walls would be utter folly. And then they see something in the air bigger than the Ilkin. The wyverns. The iron teeth are here. And almost immediately, Aedion's like, Like, this is really bad news. Against a terrestrial siege, Orynth might have held out a few days or weeks, but they could have lasted. But with 1,000 or so Iron Teeth witches who soared towards them on those wyverns, they would not need their infernal towers to destroy the city, the castle, to rip open the city gates and walls and let in Morinth's hordes. The soldiers began to spot the wyverns. People cried out along the battlements, up in the castle looming behind them. The siege would not even get the chance to be the siege. It would end today, within a few hours. Lysandra's like, okay, I'm here, like, tell me what I need to do, like, tell me how I can help with this. Her emerald eyes were wide with terror, helpless terror and despair. I can change into a wyvern, I can help, like, try to keep them. There are over 1,000 Iron Teeth, Aedion said, his voice hollow in his ears. Her fear whetted something sharp and dangerous in him, but he refrained from reaching for her. There's nothing you or we can do. And the men on the battlement start to run. They've recognized that there's nothing that they can do. And Aedion starts yelling at them, stay where you are, he bellowed, hold the line and do not balk. As Ren, goes to get the fire lances, maybe they can, shoot the wyverns out of the sky with the fire lances. And Lysandra turns to Aedion and says softly, it won't do anything, will it? Aedion says, take Evangeline and go. There is a small tunnel in the bottom level of the castle that leads into the mountains. Take her and go. Lysandra shook her head. To what end? Morath will find us all anyway. But Aedion kept his attention fixed on Lysandra. Please, I am begging you. I am begging you, Lysandra, to go. Her chin lifted. You are not asking our other allies to run. Because I am not in love with our other allies, Aedion says. For a heartbeat, she blinked at him, and then her face crumpled, and Aedion only stared at her, unafraid of the words he'd spoken, only afraid of the dark mass that swept towards them, staying within a formation above that endless army, afraid of what the Legion would do to her, to Evangeline. I should have told you, Aedion said, voice breaking. Every day after I realized it, all those months, I should have told you every day. Yet Lysandra remained at his side, made no move to run. Please, he said to her. Lysandra only linked her fingers through his in silent answer and challenge. His heart cracked at that refusal, at the hand shaking and cold that clung to his. Anyway, I'm obviously literally sobbing over this. I know, again, I talked like a big game about Aedion, like, how could I forgive him? How could Lysandra forgive him? How could she be sure that he's not going to just turn around and do it again? If this happened, if this situation happened, I would have forgiven him too. I would have folded immediately. I would have said, you're right, you should have said that, but, like, it's okay. Let's kiss. You know, Lysandra doesn't say that because she's stronger than me, but, like, those are the vibes. And all of a sudden, 13 wyverns descend from the north, and it's Abraxas and the 13. And Aedion's like, don't shoot, don't shoot. It was not the witch he had last seen on a beach in Elway. No, there was nothing of that cold, strange creature in the face that smiled grimly at him. No, nothing of her in that remarkable crown of stars atop her brow. A crown of stars for the last Crochan queen. Manon, like, lands on the battlements with Abraxas, and Aedion is, like, immediately wondering where Dorian is, because last they saw they were all together, like, where the heck did Dorian go? But, like, we don't have time to ask right now. The witches land on the city walls. Darrow is up there. Darrow's, like, standing next to them, and Darrow is, like, to Manon, is like... We will not surrender, Darrow spat. Astrid Blackbeak, her blue wyvern beside Manon's, let out a low laugh. Indeed, Manon's lips curved into a cool amusement as she said to Darrow, We have come to ensure that you don't, mortal. Darrow hissed. Then why has your master sent you to speak with us? Astrid laughed again. We have no master, Manon Blackbeak said. And it was indeed a queen's voice that she spoke with, her golden eyes bright. We come to honor a friend. We came, Manon said, loud enough that all on the city walls could hear, to honor a promise made to Aelin Galathinius to fight for what she promised us. Darrow said quietly, and what was that? Manon smiled then. A better world. Manon only looked to Aedion, that smile lingering. Long ago, the Crochans fought beside Terrasen to honor the great debt we owed the Fae King Brandon for granting us a homeland. For centuries, we were your closest allies and friends. That crown of stars blazed bright upon her head. We heard your call for aid. Lysandra began weeping, and we have come to answer it. How many? Aedion breathed, scanning the skies, the mountains. How many? Pride and awe filled the witch queen's face, and even her golden eyes were lined with silver. As she pointed towards the staghorns, see for yourself. Visually stunning moment as there's just like a wave of red cloaks flying in from the mountains. Like, when it is in the TV show, when we see this in the TV show, it's going to be stunning. And you may be like, TV show? Do you know something? I don't know. No, we're manifesting it by speaking about it as if it is happening. You know? We're just using the powers of manifestation to manifest that's a TV show. Because I need to see this with my eyeballs. I'm going to read you, like, a chunk of this. Red cloaks flowing on the wind. They filled the northern skies. So many he could not count them. Nor the swords and bows and weapons they bore on their backs. Their brooms flying straight and unwavering. Thousands of them descended upon Orynth. Thousands of them now swept over the city, his soldiers gaping upward at the stream of fluttering red. Undaunted and untroubled by the enemy force darkening the horizon. One by one, they lit upon the empty castle battlements. An aerial legion to challenge the Iron Teeth. The Crochans had returned at last. Every Crochan who could fly and wield a sword had come. Indeed, as Manon and the 13 perched on the city walls, the Crochans streamed overhead while they made their way to whatever landing place they might find on the castle battlements. It was still hard to believe they had made it, and without an hour to spare. The farther north they had flown, the more Crochans had fallen into line. As if the crown of stars Manon wore was her lodestone, summoning them to her. Every mile more appeared from the clouds, the mountains, or the forest. Young and old, wise-eyed or fresh-faced, they came, until 5,000 trailed behind Manon and the 13. And at the state of this, like, wave of Crochan witches, Orynth kind of freezes. They were, like, about to attack, and the Iron Teeth and Orynth turned back. They weren't expecting this, and they don't leave forever, unfortunately. They weren't like, so scary. They go home. But they do, like, pause. And so essentially that gives Manon and the crew, like, a night to really plan before the battle starts, now that they have this aerial legion. 5,000 Crochans would not win this war. They would not stop 100,000 soldiers, but they could keep the Orynth legions at bay, keep them from sacking the city and letting in the demon hordes, long enough for whatever small miracle Manon didn't know. She hadn't dared to ask, and none of the mortals had posed the question either. Could the city outlast 100,000 soldiers hammering its walls and gates? Perhaps. I think Manon brings this, like, kernel of hope, which has been this thing that Manon has, like, learned about. Manon has, like, learned the power and the importance of hope over the course of this novel, and I think in this moment she's bringing hope to the people of Cherased, to the city of Orynth. And they spend that night, like, in the castle, planning and organizing formations based on what they know about the Iron Teeth's battle strategy. And then the 13 find an empty room somewhere in the castle to go to sleep. Astrid spoke first, cutting through the silence of the coven. We know their every move, every weapon, and now the Crochans do too. The matrons are likely in a panic. She'd never seen her grandmother in a panic, but Manon huffed a dark laugh. We shall see tomorrow, I suppose. She surveyed her 13. You have come with me this far, but tomorrow it will be your own kind that we face. You may be fighting friends or lovers or family members. She swallowed. I will not blame you if you cannot do it. And then Sorrel says to her, we have come this far because we are all prepared for what tomorrow will bring. Indeed, the 13 nodded. Astrid said, we are not afraid. No, they were not. Looking at the clear eyes around her, Manon could see that for herself. And then Vesta says, I'd expected some from the Ferian Gap to join us. And Jeselaine says they don't understand what we've offered them. Freedom from the matrons who had forged them into tools of destruction. A waste. Astrid grumbled. Even the green-eyed twins nodded. So Manon said, looking at each of them in the eye, I would rather fly with you than with 10,000 iron teeth at my side. She smiled slightly. Tomorrow we will show them why. Her coven grinned, wicked and defiant, and touched 2 fingers to their brow in deference. Manon returned the gesture, bowing her head as she did. We are the 13, from now until the darkness claims us. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the castle, Evangeline and Lysandra are headed to bed together. Evangeline had decided that she no longer wished to be page to Lord Darrow, but rather a Crochan witch. One of the women even went so far as to give the wide-eyed girl an extra red cloak, which Evangeline was still wearing when Lysandra tucked her into bed. She'd help Darrow tomorrow, Evangeline promised as she nodded off, after she made sure the Crochans had all the help they needed. Lysandra smiled at that, despite the odds still stacked so high against them. But Lysandra can't sleep. And she starts just walking around the castle, and she's thinking to herself, what a home it would have made for her and Evangeline. What a court. She bumps into Aedion, who's in the Great Hall by himself, and she's like, hey, it seems like you should be in bed. And I could say the same thing about you. And they just watch each other for a minute, and Lysandra's thinking about how many times she has just watched him sleep. And she says to him, I thought we were going to die today. And Aedion says, we were. I'm still angry with you, she blurted, but his brows rose, light she had not seen for some time shining in his face, but she scowled. But I shall think about what you said, that's all. A familiar, wicked grin graced his lips. You'll think about it. Lysandra lifted her chin, looking down her nose at him as much as she could while he towered over her. Yes, I will think about it. What I plan to do. About the fact that I am in love with you. He knew that swaggering arrogance would knock her off kilter, if that's what you want to call it. Is there something else I'm supposed to call it? He took a single step towards her, letting her decide if she'd allow it. She did. Lysandra pressed her lips together. Don't die tomorrow, that's all I ask. So you can have time to think about what you plan to do with my declaration? Precisely. Aedion's grins turned predatory. May I ask something of you, then? I don't think you're in the position to make requests, but fine. That wolfish grin remained as he whispered in her ear, if I don't die tomorrow, may I kiss you when the day is done? Lysandra's face heated as she pulled back, yielding a step. She was a trained courtesan, gods above, highly trained, and yet the simple request reduced her knees to wobbling. She mastered herself, swaying her shoulders. If you don't die tomorrow, Aedion, then we'll talk and see what comes of it. Aedion's wolfish grin didn't so much as falter. Until tomorrow night, then. Hell waited for them tomorrow. Perhaps they're doomed, but she wouldn't kiss him. Not now. Wouldn't give him that sort of promise or farewell. So Lysandra walked from the hall, heart racing, until tomorrow. Meanwhile, Dori has been flying north for 2 days. Remember, he was in wyvern form, escaping Orynth as he brought it crumbling to the ground. And now he has stopped just for a minute for food and water. He's been trying to go as fast as he can, but he's okay, I need a minute to chat with my BFF, Gavin. And so he summons Gavin using the word keys again, or using the word marks again. And then Gavin appears and is like, obviously you found the word keys. Why are you summoning me? And Dorian says, I summoned you to give you a warning. So you know that we're probably going to seal the lock soon. So say your final goodbyes to Elena. I know that she will disappear in the end of all of this. And I like love this. I think this is so sweet. Dorian is such a gem. And Gavin is like, well, I guess this is also goodbye to you then. You've decided you're going to be the one to sacrifice yourself. And Dorian is like, well, I'm not going to do it without talking to Aelin first. Aelin is in the north and we'll decide when we're back together. Honestly, I'm kind of hoping like there's a third option that we didn't find out here. Like it's Aedion, Dorian, or like actually we can just like put them in this magic box and shake it up a couple times. I think that would be for the best for like Aelin, me, and for Elena. I put a note in here. Aelin expected to do everything around here. Dorian's like, I hope she found another way to deal with this. And then Gavin says in response to the fact that Dorian like thought of Elena, thank you, he said hoarsely, for even considering it. But grief showed in the king's eyes. He knew precisely how impossible it would be. So Dorian said, I'm sorry. For what success with the lock will mean for both of you. Gavin's throat bobbed. My mate made her choice long ago. She was always prepared to face the consequences, even if I was not. Just as Sorsha had made her own choices, followed her own path, and for once the memory of her did not ache. Rather it gleamed, a shining challenge, to make it count for her, for so many others, for himself too. Do not give up on life so easily, Gavin said. It is a life that I had with Elena that allows me even consider parting from her now. A good life, as good as any that could be hoped for. He inclined his head. I wish the same for you. Aw, that's so sweet. But before they can like chat anymore, Dorian hears a sound of the Iron Teeth Legion flying above him, the wyverns flying above him, and he's like, I gotta go. Despite the approaching army, Dorian touched Damaris's hilt and said, I will take care of it, of Ardelane. For whatever time I have left, I will not abandon it. And the sword glowed warm. Dorian is like, if the word gate is closed, will I be able to talk with you anymore? And Gavin's like, I don't know. And Dorian's kind of sad about that because he loves talking to his bestie bro, Gavin. He makes friends wherever he goes, and Gavin's his buddy, his pal. Battle of Orynth time. It's the morning of the battle, and the girlies, the 13, and the Crochans are up on the battlements. There was no armor left in the castle's depleted arsenal, and none would have fit the wyverns anyway. So they would head into battle as they always had, with nothing but their blades, their iron teeth, and nails, and their cunning. Manon is like looking out at the sun rising over this field. They can see like Morinth's forces spread out before them, and she knows this might be her last sunrise. But the 13, many of them, leaning against the balcony rail, did not look eastward. No, their attention was on the enemy, stirring in the rising light, or on the two Crochans who stood beside Manon with brooms in hand, swords already strapped to their back. They're like ready. It is very clear that they are not going to be able to beat Morath. Like, there has been no moment in which they really seriously think that their forces are enough to beat Orynth, but the witches know that they can hold off the Iron Teeth legions, and like they will do what they can. As soon as the Iron Teeth take flight and start to fill the skies, the Crochans take flight, and Manon and Bronwyn and Gladys like hang back for a second and they chat about history and how like today they fight for all the witches who fought in the witch wars before them. Each of them carries something from their past with them. They don't fly alone. They fly for the witches who fell in the witch wars. They fly for all these witches who had hoped for a homeland for the witches, for a united people, for a better world. It is for them we fight, Bronwyn said, her stare falling to the approaching army. And for the future we stand to gain. A future we all stand to gain, Manon said, and met the eyes of the 13. Though they did not smile, the fierceness in their faces spoke enough. Manon turned to Glenys. You truly intend to fight? Glenys nodded, firm and unyielding. 500 years ago, my mother chose the future of the royal bloodlines over fighting beside her loved ones. And though she never regretted her choice, the weight of what she left behind wore on her. I have had to carry her burden my entire life. The crone gestured to Bronwyn, and then to Astrid. All of us who fight here today do so with someone invisible standing behind us. Astrid's gold-flecked black eyes softened a bit. Yes, was all Manon's second said as her hand drifted to her abdomen, not in memory of the hateful word branded there, of what had been done to her, but in memory of the stillborn witchling who had been thrown by Manon's grandmother into a fire before Astrid had the chance to hold her. In the memory of the hunter whom Astrid had loved, as no Iron Teeth ever had loved a man, and had never gone back to, for shame and fear. The hunter who had never stopped waiting for her to return, even when he was an old man. For them, for the family she had lost, Manon knew her second would fight today. So it might never happen again. Manon would fight today to make sure it never did too. Lysandra, meanwhile, is in the castle. Ooh, okay, just a second. Lysandra, meanwhile, is in the tunnels underneath the castle because they have these tunnels that are full of like an underground river that lead to the Florine. It's so cold. She's jumped in the water unshifted and then starts to shift as she swims, but it's like freezing. She's like literally dodging blocks of ice as she like swims down the Florine. The Crochans fly up from the sky, and the Iron Teeth fly up from the fields, and the archers are ready at the battlements. The Mysians are also on the battlements with their fire lances, and then Ren and Aedion are up there, and Ren says to Aedion, "You really think they can fight against that?" Ren nodded towards the oncoming sea of iron-teeth witches and wyverns. "I don't think we have any other choice but to hope they can," Aedion said, unslinging his bow from across his back. Ren did the same. Morath marched. There would be no more delays, no more surprises. This battle would unfold. And Aedion says, "Let's make this a fight worthy of a song." Like, there's still really not hope that they will win, but there is hope that they will, like, be brave, that their courage will become the stuff of legends. Manon and the 13 shot into the skies as the Crochan army flowed below, a red tide rushing towards the sea of black ahead, forcing the Iron-Teeth Legion to choose their ancient enemies or their new ones. And Manon has essentially, like, set this up so she can test the Iron-Teeth to see how many of them are willing to go directly with the 13, because the Iron-Teeth had not trained to really fight another aerial force that they're, like, directly engaging with. They had fought to be an aerial force against a force that only had, like, land people. They, like, don't know how to fight an enemy that knows how to fight back. But the Crochans are obviously, like, much more, even though there are, I believe, are more Crochans than Iron-Teeth, the Crochans are obviously much more vulnerable to attack than the Iron-Teeth are, because Iron-Teeth are on giant wyverns and the Crochans are on literal brooms. So they have to be more careful. But the Crochans are, like, the strategy then is for the Crochans to go for the riders, not for the wyverns. Like, a Crochan taking out a wyvern is going to be much more difficult than taking out a rider. And so that's what they are attempting to do. Manon spots Petra Yellowlegs pretty early on in this battle, but Iskra Blueblood is absent, or at least as much as Manon can't see. In fact, they, like, realize pretty quickly that the witches from the Ferian Gap, the witches they had seen like a week earlier in the Ferian Gap, aren't here. None of them are here yet, and Manon is wondering if they just, like, haven't arrived or what the deal is. But the fighting is beginning. Meanwhile, Lysandra, she shifted into a giant sea dragon, or a river dragon, actually, because she's in the Florine River, and she's gobbling people up. She's waiting until they get close enough to shore and eating them. She's waiting until they, like walk on the ice, and then she's punching through the ice and gobbling them up. And it says, "Slowly the turquoise waters of the Florine clouded blue and black. Still Lysandra kept ripping bites from the sides of the behemoth that launched itself at Orynth." So she's helping by gobbling people. Meanwhile, Aedion is up on the battlements watching all this fighting going down. The witches are battling above them, and the battling is so fierce that there is a, like, blue mist that hangs in the air from all of the blue blood that is being shed. And at the same time, fire lances are being used to, like, push back the people with the siege ladders. They're, like, really trying to hold back the forces. But then the first, like, siege ladder is able to, like, be successfully, like, mounted against the wall and have people climb up. The first guy that comes up is killed immediately. But then the second guy that comes up is a Valg Prince. And Aedion is ready to fight the Valg Prince to the best of his abilities, but again, he doesn't have magic. And the Valg do have, like, pretty strong magic powers, that, like, black tendril magic that, like, Maeve has, the Valg have as well. The prince tries to strike Aedion with the Valg magic, but the magic is deflected by Rose's shield, which did make me feel a little bit bad about bullying Aedion for using it earlier. Like, obviously it's helpful. Okay, I guess Aedion can use it. Rose's shield. There was no magic in it. Brandon had never borne it. But one of them had forged it. One of the unbroken lines of kings and queens who had come after him, who had loved their kingdom more than their own lives, who had carried the shield into battle, into war, to defend Terrasen. And as Aedion and the Valg Prince fought along the walls, as that ancient shield refused to yield, he wondered if there was a different sort of power in the metal. One that the Valg could never and would never understand. Not true magic, as Brandon and Aelin had, but something just as stronger. That Valg might never break, no matter how hard they tried. Love. Some, like, Harry Potter, love is more powerful than darkness magic. We love. Sorry, there's a reason that's in, like, all of the books, because it slays. Love is more powerful than evil? Slays every time. But then, just as, like, Aedion's like, oh my gosh, my shield might actually be, like, powered by the magic of love and love of country, the Valg Prince does stab him in the armpit. Bummer. He's bleeding out. The Valg Prince chuckled, and Aedion was dimly aware of the fighting along the walls, the shouting, the dying, the flares of fire, as the prince smiled down at the bloody dagger, bringing it to his sensual mouth. Again, the Valg out here with Juvederm lips. Every single time. Seriously. Their mouths were so sensual, so kissable, so luscious. They might have been evil, but their lips were pouty. Can someone ask them what they're using? Are they using a lunar sleep mask? Are they out here with a lip oil? And I need to know, what are the Valg using on their lips? Anyway, he licks the blood off the blade. Aedion is, like, on the ground, trying to hold the shield above him as this Valg, like, goes to literally gobble up his despair. As you know, that's what the Valgs love to munch on. But then Ren shoots the Valg in the back of the neck. As the Valg turns around, Ren hits him with a fire lance, which I assume fire lances are just, like, literal giant flamethrowers. giant flamethrowers. Off the side of the boat, they seem like cannon-sized flamethrowers. I'm unsure if they are or if they're like that size. This one is pocket size. Anyway, Aedion panted, a hand going to his bleeding side. I had him! And then Aedion blacks out. And to be honest, I don't know if Aedion's joking. I don't know if Aedion is making a little giggly fun joke as he passes out, because clearly he was about to die, or if he like really seriously thought that. I unfortunately think it might be the latter. I really think he might have thought that he did have that under control. And I do think Aedion, again, needs to do some work on like making sure that his arrogance is in check. And this is one of those situations in which I think it was maybe not. I don't know. Maybe he was joking. If he was joking, hilarious. A cutie little joke. I liked it. If he wasn't joking, red flag. Inside the castle, Evangeline is like, this is the literal worst. Like, it is worse than she anticipated, but she's still running messages for Darrow. Meanwhile, every time, like, she hears, like, an explosion, she's like, ah. And she runs upstairs and she delivers a message from Killian and is, like, standing there waiting for Darrow to make a reply. Even with the roar of battle, she heard Darrow declare to the other lords, Aedion has been wounded. Evangeline's stomach dropped. Nausea, oily and thick, surging. Is he all right? The other two lords ignored her, but Darrow looked her way. He has lost consciousness, and they have moved him into a building near the wall. Healers are working on him as we speak. They will move him here as soon as he is capable of withstanding it. And Evangeline is, like, really rattled because she's, like, really grown quite fond of Aedion. She thinks to herself she had never had a brother or a father, and she hadn't decided which she would like Aedion to be. And then Darrow turns to her, kind of sees that she's flustered, and he's like, Lord Gunnar will deliver my reply. Like, you stay with me. I might have need of you. Like, I might need you to do something. And he gets her some snacks and a hot drink, and she's watching kind of things unfold out the window. She can see Lysandra and Sea Dragon form in the river, and she knows Lysandra's okay because she can see her, and that's, like, a little bit comforting, but she's still so worried. She thinks to herself, her friends were down there, her family, the one she'd made, far out, near the river. A blur of motion was her only indication that Lysandra still lived. Cut to, oh my gosh, we get a little treat. Is everyone excited? This is a good one. Sarah gets us a little treat before we go into the bad place. Okay, great. I'm excited. We're going to enjoy this. We're going to relish it. Aelin and the Southern Continent armies are moving as fast as they can, but Aelin still is like, we're going to be too late. Like, it's still going to take us a while. It's been over a week since they've been marching, and it'll likely be about 10 days before they get to Terrasen. They are approaching Endover and Parenth, and they're a little bit worried about going past Parenth because Orynth has taken over Parenth. So it's kind of a risky situation. Aelin is also personally feeling like a little bit nervous about going past Endover and seeing that place where kind of this journey began for her, and this year where she was enslaved, and kind of one of the worst years of her life. Although, like, to be honest, haven't any of them been nice. They haven't really gotten any updates on how Orynth is doing. They're still a little bit too far to send Rooks out to, like, scout out how Orynth is doing. And they also haven't received any messengers from anyone at Terrasen, so they don't know if Orynth is, like, holding, if Orynth has arrived there, like, what the deal with Orynth is. And so it's just this, like, sense of dread, as they know Bad News Bears is coming to Orynth and has probably arrived, and they don't know how they're holding up. That night, they, like, stop for a few hours. They're traveling as fast as they can, but obviously it's a large army, and they need to rest. They need to let their horses rest. And so that night, they're in a tent. Rowan and Aelin are, and Aelin is spread out, getting her back tattooed. She has been most nights when they camp. Rowan works on her back for a few hours. She couldn't see what he'd inked, but she knew the design. A replica of what he'd written on her back this spring. The stories of her loved ones and their deaths, written right where her scars had been. Exactly where they had been. As if he had their memory etched into his mind. And another tattoo lay there now. A tattoo that sprawled across her shoulder bones as if it were a pair of spread wings, or so he had sketched for her. The story of them. Rowan and Aelin. The story that had begun in rage and sorrow and become something different entirely. She was glad to have him. Leave it at that. At the happiness. Remember when I told you it was treats only? It's like just the story of how they, like, found their way back to each other. This last part. She was glad to have him. Leave it at that. At the happiness. She, like, doesn't want him to write in the ending of their story because she thinks they're coming upon it, like, quite soon. Anyway, then they chat about Endover. Aelin is like, we pass through Endover tomorrow. And Rowan says, what do you want to do about it? And Aelin says, burn it to the ground, blast the mountains into rubble. And Rowan is like, sick, sounds great, bet, we'll go do that, I'll help you. And Aelin is like, the fabled warrior prince wouldn't tell me to avoid carelessly wasting my power. And Rowan says, the fabled warrior prince would tell you to stay the course, but if destroying Endover will help, then he will be right there with you. I don't think I can, Aelin breathed. I don't think I can even stand to look at Endover, let alone destroy it. And Rowan's like, okay, do you want me to go do it? I can fly over there, explode it in just a second. A calm warrior's question. He would, she knew, if she asked him, he'd fly to Endover and turn it into dust. No, she admitted. The overseers and slaves are all gone anyway. There's no one to destroy and no one to save. I just want to pass it and never think of it again. Does that make me a coward? Rowan says, no, actually, I think that makes you human. And then Maelon's like, the strange thing is that I haven't been human in a long time. Like, I've been in my fae body for, like, a while. And she talks about how she's feeling, like, less and less human these days, even though she, like, grew up her entire life only in human form. And Rowan is like, I think you can be both. Like, you can exist as both. And she's like, I don't know. I think your people want me to pick one. And he's like, okay, well, you've never listened to what other people think. Aelin gritted her teeth as his needle pierced along her spine. I'm glad you're here, that I'll see Endover again for the first time with you here. To face that part of her past, that suffering and torment, if she couldn't yet look too closely at the last several months. His tools, the numbing pain, halted, and then his lips brushed the top of her spine, right above the start of that new tattoo. The same tattoo he'd had Gabriel and Fenris inking on his own back these past few days. I'm glad to be here too, Fireheart. For however much longer the gods would allow it. Okay, here's our treat. Are you ready? Okay. We get a little treat. I'm still crying. Hold on. Let me wipe my tears before we go to before we get our treat. I feel like we could have gotten some Kale and Irene as a treat too. We haven't gotten really many cute Kale and Irene scenes in this section. None, actually. I don't know if they've interacted. I could have used a little Kale and Irene as a treat. We get Lorcan and Elide though. Lorcan and Elide are in their tent. Elide is quite sore after like a full day of helping Irene in the healing wagon. She's been like, you know, she's assisting. She's assisting in healings. And Lorcan is like, you should rest more. I'm like worried about how much you're exerting yourself. And Elide is like, Irene doesn't rest. And she's throwing up like once an hour because she's so pregnant. And having a bad time. And Elide starts like rubbing salve into her leg. And when Lorcan reaches over and is like, let me. And Elide is kind of taken aback by the comment that she just allows it. His thumb met the spot on her ankle where the bone ground against bone. Elide let out a groan. He carefully, with near reverence it seemed, began easing the ache away. These hands had slaughtered their way across kingdoms, bore the faint scars to prove it, and yet he held her foot as if it were a small bird, as if it were something holy. Alternating long strokes with small circles, Lorcan slowly coaxed the pain from her foot. Seemed content to do just that all night should she wish it. I'm sorry. We're gonna read that line again because these hands had slaughtered their way across kingdoms, bore the faint scars to prove it, and yet he held her foot as if it were a small bird, as if it were something holy. Guys, I'm like kind of obsessed with that. Like I'm kind of obsessed with that. And I have a comment in my notes that says, you know what? Giant man, tiny lady hits different. Allie Hazelwood might be onto something. Because if you know Allie Hazelwood is like a contemporary romance author. She got a lot of crap on the internet because her first two books, I think really, and like honestly, maybe something she likes, had like a giant man and a tiny lady. And there was like a lot of conversation about how giant the man was and how tiny the lady was. And people were like, Allie, why are you doing this all the time? And now she has some medium-sized people. But also like there is something about giant man, tiny lady that just kind of hits a little different. And I think it's this thing where he has like giant war-flecked hands and he's holding her tiny little baby foot. Her foot is not a baby. But her tiny little foot, she probably has a size 4 shoe. Remember, she's 5 foot on a good day. She's like tiny little bitty. He's holding her foot like it is a frail baby bird. Oh my gosh. Something about it just hits different. It just hits different. Anyway, they start talking as Lorcan is still like rubbing her foot. He says to her, you are well and truly the Lady of Orynth now. Like at this point, her uncle has definitely kicked the bucket back in Ferian Gap. And Elide's like, this is what you really wish to talk about. His fingers didn't halt their miraculous, sinful work. Lorcan is like, well, we haven't spoken of it yet, about Vernon. And Elide is like, what of it? She said, trying and failing for nonchalance. But he looked up at her from beneath his thick lashes, well aware of her evasion. Elide loosed a breath, peering at the tense peak ceiling. Does it make me any better than Vernon? How I chose to punish him in the end? She hadn't regretted it on that first day, or the second. But these long miles, as it had become clear that Vernon was likely dead, she'd wondered. Only you can decide that, I think, Lorcan said. For what it's worth, he deserved it. His dark power rumbled through the room. Of course you'd say that, Elide said. He shrugged, not bothering to deny it. And then he says to her, Orynth will recover, you know, from Morath's sacking. And all Vernon did to it before now. And Elide is like, only if we win this war. Like, if we win this war, we'll have the chance to see that. If not. Lorcan resumed his soothing strokes. Orynth will be rebuilt, was all he said. We will see that it is. Have you ever done it? Rebuilt a city? No, he admitted, his thumbs coaxing the pain from her aching bones. I have only destroyed them. His eyes lifted to hers, searching and open. But I should like to try. With you. Sarah said, okay, it's about to be a really bad place, but I'm gonna give you a treat. And Elide says in response, yes, for however long we have. And then he takes off her other boot and helps to get her ready for the bath. And then he's gonna leave to give her some privacy so she can like change and take a bath in peace, which the baths at camp are all heated because Aelin keeps everyone warm and toasty. She loves a bath and she says, you know what? My soldiers are gonna have the coziest baths. We may be traveling, we may be soldiers, but we're gonna have cozy baths at the end of the day. Anyway, so Elide's about to get ready for her bath. And she's like, I actually need help getting into my bath. Actually, I need help, so I can't leave. I need help getting into the bath. And Lorcan says, do you now? His voice was near guttural. Elide bit her lip. I might slip. Dangerous, dangerous time. His eyes drifted down her body, but he made no move. A dangerous time, bath time. And then Lorcan helps her get all the way ready for a bath. All the way ready. Helps her remove every article of clothing, leave the bath, and they go to bed. Home. This with him. This was home. As she had never had, for as long as they might share it. I feel like this is particularly sweet because back in Empire Storms, that was like the moment like Lorcan, we like really see the like romance start to like really flower between Lorcan and Elide is when she offers him a home and now he is her home. And when Lorcan laid her on the cot, his breathing as uneven as her own. When he paused, letting her decide what to do, where to take this, Elide kissed him again and whispered, show me everything. So Lorcan did. I love this chapter. I love this part. Thank you, Sarah. Everyone say thank you. Everyone say thank you to Sarah for this lovely little treat. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, I have some thoughts. You ready, everyone? Unpopular opinion, I think this scene is perfect just the way it is. I know, like, there's a lot of conversation, if you're, like, involved in the Throne of Glass, like, larger conversation about this last part. People are like, so Lorcan did what? What did Lorcan do? Like, they wanted more. They wanted, like, a spicier scene here. And I just think this scene is perfection as it is. I think there is such a beautiful, like, tenderness and protectiveness between, like, Lorcan and Elide in this moment that I think would be a little bit undercut if we, like, got more spice. And I'm, like, not anti-spice. I think spice has its, like, place in its role in books. And I think some of the other, like, scenes we get here and, like, in some of her more adult books, like, we get in, like, Silver Flames and even earlier in the ACOTAR series, I think some of those scenes, like, really serve the story well. But I don't think a spice scene here would have served the story well. Like, I think what we have here serves the story beautifully. And like, girlies, use your imagination. What did Lorcan do? Picture it. Go read some fan fiction online. But like, I think it's giving like tenderness and restraint in a way that like the Mr. Darcy hand flex feels like quite like wow. Because it is like so like restrained. I feel like this feels similar. I don't know. I don't need to know what Lorcan did. I can use my imagination. Meanwhile, another part of camp, Aelin has like a really bad nightmare where she is trapped in this like misty world between this coffin and this gate, and she can hear a woman screaming in the coffin. I assume it's supposed to be her. And she knows that Dorian is like getting ripped apart in the gate, and she's just like stuck between them, these two choices. And as she's like stuck between them, she feels the iron mask slip back on her face. And she wakes up and does not fall back asleep again. Sarah was like, don't forget, Aelin is still traumatized. If you forgot for a second, don't. The next morning, they get back on the road. Aelin is, like, burning a path for them through the Oakwalds because they are such a large army that walking on, like, the narrow trails is just, like, too slow. So she's, like, essentially, like, burning down a wider path. And she's like, sorry, Oakwald. Like, apologies, but, like, we gotta do what we gotta do. Rowan had finished the tattoo on her back the night before. In the early hours that they had ridden closer to Endover, she had found the invisible weight of the ink to be studying. She had gotten out. She had survived from Endover and Maeve. And now it was upon her to ride like hell for the north, to save her people before Morath wiped them away forever, before Erwan and Maeve arrived to do just that. Some point during the day, Aelin and Elide wind up next to each other, and Aelin catches the vibe that Elide and Lorcan were up to funny business last night. She does. She catches the vibe, and like Elide is just like blushing and just like the vibes are different. She can tell that they were up to funny business the night before. But Elide doesn't want to talk about that. Elide says to, because they're about to like cross the border into Terrasen. Elide says to Aelin, whoa, slip of the tongue called her Selena. I didn't think I'd ever get to see Terrasen again. Once Vernon took me out of Parenth. Aelin said. There was a time when I thought I'd never see it too. Elide's face grew contemplative. When you were an assassin or when you were a slave? Both, Aelin explained. It was a torture of another kind when I was at Endover, to know that home was only miles away, and that I would not be able to see it one last time before I died. Elide's dark eyes shone with understanding. I thought I would die in that tower, and that no one would remember I existed. They had both been captives, slaves of a sort. They had both worn shackles and bore the scars of them, or Elide did. The lack of them on Aelin still ripped at her, an absence that she never thought she'd regret. We made it out in the end, Aelin said. Elide reached over to squeeze Aelin's hand. Yes, we did. Even if now she wished for it to be over, all of it. Her every breath felt weighed down by that wish. Okay, Aelin, I'm gonna need you to maybe turn the self-talk a little bit more positive. Don't love the vibes here, which are a little bit scary for me as a reader. They're riding along when all of a sudden there's a wyvern overhead. They're like ready to fight, but then the wyvern starts shooting off ice magic. Rowan shouts for everyone to hold their fire. It was not Abraxas who landed at the crossroads, and there was no sign of Manon Blackbeak. Light flashed again, and then Dorian Havillard stood there, his jacket and cape stained and worn. Aelin galloped down the road towards him, Rowan and Elide beside her, the others at their back. Dorian lifted a hand, his face grave as death, even as his eyes widened at the sight of her. But Aelin sensed it then, what Dorian carried, the word keys. All three of them. Uh-oh. That's actually where we're going to leave them. We're not going to see these guys again for this video, which is kind of a bummer because I do think we almost immediately get the Dorian and Kale reunion, which I can't handle. But we're not going to get this one. Aedion wakes up as soon as he started getting stitches. So remember, Aedion was attacked by that Val Prince. He was passed out in the battlements. He woke up as soon as he started getting stitches, then he passed out again, but only for like an hour, and then he stumbled back towards the wall. He did not head to the castle to rest like he was supposed to. He headed straight back for the wall. And on the walk back to the wall, as he goes up and he kind of sees the battle playing out in front of him, he's thinking about his dad. Had Gabriel heard across the sea, or wherever their hunt for Aelin had taken him, the Terrason was about to fall. Would he care? It didn't matter, even if part of him wished the lion were there. Rowan and the others certainly, but the steady presence of Gabriel would have been a balm to these men, perhaps to him. Which is cute. I love that Aedion is thinking about his dad, because Gabriel is definitely thinking about him. And the snow around the city is stained red, and Lysandra's still fighting, but she's also bleeding as well. And Aedion is like, what is she doing? She's like munching off soldiers like right along the coast, like, and it just like is not the most effective thing she could be doing, and he's kind of weirded out. Aedion wakes up as soon as he started getting stitches. So remember, Aedion was attacked by that Val Prince. He was passed out in the battlements. He woke up as soon as he started getting stitches, then he passed out again, but only for like an hour, and then he stumbled back towards the wall. He did not head to the castle to rest like he was supposed to. He headed straight back for the wall. And on the walk back to the wall, as he goes up and he kind of sees the battle playing out in front of him, he's thinking about his dad. Had Gabriel heard across the sea, or wherever their hunt had taken for Aelin, had taken him, the Terrason was about to fall. Would he care? It didn't matter, even if part of him wished the lion were there. Rowan and the others certainly, but the steady presence of Gabriel would have been a balm to these men, perhaps to him. Which is cute. I love that Aedion is thinking about his dad, because Gabriel is definitely thinking about him. And the snow around the city is stained red, and Lysandra's still fighting, but she's also bleeding as well. And Aedion is like, what is she doing? She's like munching off soldiers like right along the coast, like, and it just like is not the most effective thing that she could be doing, and he's kind of weirded out. And then he realizes that she's fighting so aggressively there because she's trying to signal to the men on the wall to like look in that direction, to look over where she is, because since Lysandra had snuck into the river through the tunnels, that had given them the element of surprise with this like river dragon, but it also had revealed that those tunnels existed. And so now Morath's men is trying to sneak their way into the city through those tunnels. Fighting against the fuzziness growing in his head, Aedion began signaling. First to the shifter holding the line, trying so valiantly to keep those forces at bay. Then to the 13, perilously high in the skies, to get back to the walls, to stop Morath's creeping before it was too late. So they are trying to get into the palace from the corner over there, and Aedion is like, we gotta stop that. Manon sees Aedion signaling to fall back to the wall, and she calls back to the 13. She like kind of sees what's going on, and she's like, okay guys, to the walls. She goes to steer Abraxas back towards the city, and Astrid calls out and is like, Manon, watch out, but like it's too late. Iskra Yellowlegs slams into Abraxas. And I want you to know that Iskra Yellowlegs is on my most hated characters in this book list, right under Arobynn and Karn. Arobynn, Karn, Iskra Yellowlegs. You might be like, is it Maeve on this list? What about Erewhon? I feel like Erewhon makes like a lot of dumb choices. Like Erewhon has like literally all the power in this situation, and he's just like made not that many effective choices. And so he just, because he's ineffective, he's not on this list. And he also hasn't had like a lot of direct contact with Aelin. The Kaltain situation, evil. I'm not saying he's not evil. He's just not on my most hated characters list. And Maeve could have made her way on the list, but I have a soft spot for her. Okay, she's evil. I get it. But I also really understand the motivation of just wanting to hang out with in a world that has the color blue. Dorian was a cutie little place. If she didn't torture everyone and just minded her own business, nobody would have even cared. And that was a choice that she could have made. And she didn't. But I can't hate her all the way. Most of the way I do. But she's not on the most hated list. Iskra Yellowlegs, though, get your booty on there. Don't be biting Abraxas. Do not, look at me in my eyeballs right now. Don't you fight Abraxas. Abraxas is my most beloved character. So this moment really was stressful. My worst fear is coming true. So Iskra Yellowlegs, watch out. And Iskra's bull clamps on to Abraxas's neck. At the sight of those powerful jaws around Abraxas's throat, the fear and pain in his eyes, Manon couldn't breathe, couldn't think around the terror rushing through her, so blinding and sickening that for a few heartbeats she was frozen. Wholly frozen. Abraxas, hers. He was hers and she was his, and the darkness had chosen them to be together. And Manon, like, freaks for a second. She, like, freezes for a second. She doesn't even know how long she, like, freezes for. But then she steadies herself, gets an arrow, and, like, tries to shoot it at, like, at Iskra's wyvern's face. And it, like, sticks into his face, but it isn't enough to dislodge him. The wyvern is not, like, deep enough to, like, kill Abraxas outright. But Manon knows that if he holds on for long enough, Abraxas isn't breathing. And so Abraxas will suffocate and die. Iskra was laughing as Abraxas fought and could not get free. Manon looked for the 13, for anyone to save them, save him, he who mattered more than any other, whom she would trade places with if the three-faced goddess allowed it. To have her own throat gripped in those terrible jaws. And Abraxas's wings begin to slow. And Manon unbuckles herself from the saddle as she's begging Iskra to stop. She wouldn't bear it, this death, his pain, his fear before it. She might have been sobbing, might have been screaming as his wing beats faltered again. She'd leap across the goddamn wind, rip that from the saddle, and slit her mouth's throat. Manon's like, that bitch. Abraxas starts to dive lower, and Manon knows that it's so when he dies, that Manon will be close enough to the ground to be safe. He's like making sure he's taking care of her even in this moment. Please, her scream to Iskra carried across the battlefield, across the world. Please, she would beg, she would crawl if it brought him the chance to live. Her warrior-hearted mount, who had saved her far more than she had ever saved him. Who had saved her in the ways that most counted. Please, she screamed it with every scrap of her shredded soul. Iskra only laughed. And the bull did not let go, even as Abraxas tried to get them closer to the ground. And Manon unbuckles the last bits of her saddle, and she's like ready to literally jump across the way to Iskra. And she's like too far of a jump, but she's like, I'm gonna do it anyway. She didn't care about any of it. The waist, the Crochans, the iron teeth, her crown, she didn't care about any of it. If Abraxas was not there with her. And she says to Abraxas, touching his spine, I love you. It was the only thing that mattered in the end. The only thing that mattered now. Before Manon can jump, another wyvern attacks Iskra's bull, freeing Abraxas's neck, and Manon straps herself back into the saddle as Abraxas like tries to right himself, but he's like pretty badly injured, and she looks up and she sees that it was Petra Blueblood. And behind her, heir to the Blueblood witch clan, now slamming into Morinth's aerial legion from where they'd crept onto the battlefield from high above the clouds, were the Iron Teeth. Hundreds of them, hundreds of Iron Teeth witches and their wyverns. Crashed into their own. Petra and Iskra pulled apart, the blue blood air flapping towards Manon while Abraxas fought to stay upright. Even with the wind, the battle, Manon still heard Petra as the blue blood air said to her, a better world. Oh, and this is where we see Manon's small act of kindness. Saving the day. And Manon is like, I have to go to the walls. And Petra says, go, she is mine. Go, Petra snarled. And when Manon again hesitated, Petra only said, for Keely. So Manon nodded. Darkness embrace you. And then Manon heads for the city because Abraxas needs to rest and needs a healer. Like, he needs a healer quite badly. And she's, like, watching as she flies back as Iskra and Petra, like, tussle. Iskra winds up pulling Petra into this, like, little death spiral where, like, her wyvern is falling and Petra's, like, circling so tightly and so fast that Manon wondered if the blue blood heir had been practicing for these months, training for this very moment, for the vengeance owed to her and to Keely. But Petra doesn't pull out of the drop, and Manon is like, she needs to pull out. If she does not pull out of this drop, she's not going to be able to survive this. And as the ground seemed to rise up to meet them, Manon heard Petra's only words to Iskra, like they had been carried to her on the wind. For Keely. Petra's wyvern flung out its wings, banking sharper than any wyvern Manon had ever witnessed, rising up, wingtip grazing the icy ground before it shot back into the skies, leaving Iskra and her bull to splatter on the earth. The boom rumbled past Manon, thundering through the world. Iskra and her bull did not rise again. And Manon brings Abraxas to land alongside the Ferian River, where a band of Morath troops are, like, trying to sneak into Orynth. He's, like, not doing awesome. He's, like, not doing awesome. But, Manon knows they need to, like, do this one thing before she can take him into the city. And they wind up picking up these, like, giant boulders. They have their wyverns pick up these boulders and, drop them in front of the entrance to the river. Not to, like, crush the guys that are there, but to, like, block the entrance. And they build up this, like, big pile of boulders that, like, completely block off the entrance and will make it, like, much more difficult, obviously, for the men to get in there. You know? And the moment they're finished, Astrid sees how much Abraxas is struggling and tells Manon to get inside the gates. Like, get that boy inside the gates. Abraxas can, like, barely move. By the time he gets there, he, like, slams into the side of the castle. He can't even, like, land gently. His injury on the side of his neck was worse than Manon initially thought. Manon shoved her hands against the deep, wet bite wound, blood rushing past her fingers like water past a cracked dam. Help is coming, she told him, and found her voice to be a broken rasp. The 13 landed, Sorrel sprinting into the castle to no doubt drag a healer out if she had to, and then there were 11 pairs of hands on Abraxas' neck, staunching the flow of his blood, pressing as one. Manon couldn't look at them, couldn't do anything but close her eyes and pray to the darkness, to the three-faced mother, as she held her hands over the bleeding gashes. Racing footsteps sounded over the battlement stones, and then Sorrel was there beside Manon, her hands rising to cover his wounds too. An older woman unpacked a kit, warning them to keep applying pressure. Manon didn't bother to tell her that they weren't going anywhere. None of them were. Even while the battle raged in the skies and on the land below. Lysandra is, like, watching all of this happen. She, as a wyvern, flying over the city, looking at the 13 as they pull up to the castle walls, and then she shifts into human form to, like, join them up there. And Abraxas is getting healed at one end of the battlements, and Aedion is lying on the ground at the other end. And he's, like, bleeding, and Ren is like, he's being the worst. He, like, came up here too soon, and he ripped out all of his stitches. Lysandra's like, okay, let's get you back to the healer, Aedion. And Aedion's like, I've already been to the healers. I'm resting up here. And Ren is like, sit down before you crack your head open. I'm going back out to the wall, but, like, you are causing problems. And Ren turns to leave, but Lysandra calls him over, as well as Manon. She calls both of them over. Lysandra makes sure that Abraxas, she, like, checks on Abraxas. She's like, hey, is Abraxas gonna be fine? And Manon is like, yes. And then she delivers the news that she, like, shifted into human form to deliver. They have the witch tower up again. It's moving this way. I just saw it myself. The witches have gathered atop it. Absolute silence. As if in answer, the tower erupted, not towards them, but skyward. A flash of light. A boom louder than thunder. And then a portion of the sky became empty. Lysandra says, they meaned to blast the city apart. Manon is looking out over the battlements and watching the Crochans try to reach the tower to dismantle it, but they're taken down immediately. The Iron Teeth are just, like, too tightly around the witch tower for anyone to get close enough to do anything. And Manon realizes this witch tower, as soon as it's pointed at the city, will take out the city in a couple blows. Like, it'll take out the castle in one blow, the city walls, and maybe one or two more, and then, like, it'll be over. Like, this battle will be over so quickly. There would be no survivors, no second chances. Manon turned to Astrid and said quietly, I need another wyvern. Her second only stared at her. Manon repeated, I need another wyvern. Abraxas was in no shape to fly. Wouldn't be for hours or days. Aedion Ash River rashed. No one is getting through that wall of iron teeth. Manon bared her teeth. I am. She pointed at her shapeshifter. You can carry me. And Aedion's like, no, you could literally not have Lysandra. Lysandra also shakes her head. Sorrow and despair in her green eyes. I can't. The magic is drained. If I had an hour. And Manon's like, we don't have an hour. We have 5 minutes. She whirled to the 13. We have trained for this. To break apart enemy ranks. We can get through them. We can take apart that tower. But they all looked at each other. Like they'd had some unspoken conversation or an agreement. The 13 stalked towards their own mounts. Sorrel clasped Manon's shoulder as she passed, and then climbed onto her wyvern's back, leaving Astrid before Manon, her second, her cousin, her friend. Her second, her cousin, her friend, smiled, eyes bright as stars. Live, Manon. Manon blinked. Astrid smiled wider, kissed Manon's brow and whispered again, live. Manon didn't see the blow coming. The punch to her gut, so hard and precise that it knocked the wind from her, sent her to her knees. She was struggling to get a breath down, to get up when Astrid reached Nareen and mounted the blue mare, gathering the reins. "Bring our people home, Manon." Manon knew then what they were going to do. Her legs failed her, her body failed her. She tried to get to her feet. As she rasped, "No." But Astrid and the 13 were already in the skies, already in formation. That battering ram that had served them so well, spearing towards the battlefield, towards the approaching witch tower. Ooh. I can't breathe. Manon clawed her way to the battlement's edge and hauled herself to her feet, leaned against the stones, panting, trying to get some air into her lungs so she might find some way to get airborne, some Crochan, and steal their broom. But there were no witches here, no brooms to be found, and the Abraxas remained unconscious. Manon and everyone on the battlements gathers to watch as the 13 approach the witch towers and the Iron Teeth surrounding it. A wall of Iron Teeth rose up before the tower, blocking their path, 100 against 12. And there's a witch inside ready to make the yielding. They can see her. The 13 neared the enemy in their path and did not falter. Manon dug her fingers into the stones so hard her iron nails cracked, began shaking her head, something in her chest fracturing completely. Fracturing as the 13 slammed into the Iron Teeth blockade. The maneuver was perfect, more flawless than any they had ever done. A lethal phalanx that speared through the enemy's ranks, aiming right for the tower, clearing a path right to the tower as Astrid swept in from the back, aiming for the uppermost level. Imogene went down first, then Lynn and Jezelaine, her wyvern swarmed by their enemy, then Thea and Kaya, always together as they had always been. And then the green-eyed demon twins, laughing as they went down. Then the shadows, Edda and Briar, arrows still firing, still finding their marks. Then Vesta, roaring her defiance to the skies. Then Sorrel, who had held the way open for Astrid. A solid wall for Manon's second as she soared in. A wall against whom the waves of Iron Teeth broke and broke. Twirling, twisting, blades flying, Astrid slaughtered her way towards Manon's grandmother. The High Witch of the Blackfleet clan backed away, shaking her head. Her mouth moved as if she breathed. Astrid, no. But Astrid was already there. And it was not darkness, but light. Light bright and pure as the sun on the snow that erupted from Astrid. Light as Astrid made the yielding. As the 13, their broken bodies scattered around a tower in a near circle, made the yielding as well. Light. They all burned with it, radiated it. Light that flowed from their souls, their fierce hearts, as they gave themselves over to that power, became incandescent with it. Astrid tackled the Blackpeak matron to the ground. Manon's grandmother little more than a shadow against the brightness, then little more than a scrap of hate and memory as Astrid exploded, as she and the 13 yielded completely, and blew themselves and the witch towers to smithereens. Manon sank to the stones of the castle battlements and did not move for a long, long while. And she eventually falls asleep up there. And when she wakes up, Abraxas has a wing draped around her, and dawn has just started to break, and Orynth has fallen back. And where that witch tower had stood, where their army had been, only blasted earth remained. And she wakes up Abraxas as the dawn begins to break. And he can't fly yet, so they walk, and people start to follow them as they walk through the city streets and out through the city gates. Manon crossed the still battlefield, did not stop until she reached the center of the blast radius, until she stood in its heart. Not a trace of the tower, or those who had been in it, around it. Even the stones had been melted into nothing. Not a trace of the 13 or of their brave, noble wyverns. Manon fell to her knees. Asters rose, fluttering soft as snow, as they clung to the tears on her face. Abraxas lay beside her, his tail curling around her while she bowed over her knees and wept. Behind her, had she looked up, she would have seen Glennis and Bronwyn, Petra Blueblood, Aedion Ashriver and Lysandra, and Renel's Brook, Prince Gallon, and Captain Rolf, and Ansel of Briargate, and Ilias, and the Fey Royals beside them. Had she looked, she would have seen the small white flowers they bore, would have wondered how and where they had gotten them in the dead heart of winter. Had she looked, she would have seen the people gathered behind them, so many they streamed all the way to the city gates. Would have seen the humans standing side by side with the Crochans and the Iron Teeth, all come to honor the 13. But Manon did not look, even when the leaders who had come with her, walked with her all this way, began to lay down their flowers upon the blasted, bloodied earth, even when their tears flowed, dropping into the ashes alongside their offerings of tribute, and they did not speak, and neither did the streaming line of people who came after them. A few bore flowers, but Minnie brought small stones to lay on the site. Those who had neither laid down whatever personal effects they could offer, until the last site was covered, as if a garden had grown from a field of blood. Oh my god, I'm like gonna be dehydrated after this. Glenys stayed until the end, and when they were alone on the silent battlement, Manon's great-grandmother put a hand on her shoulder and said quietly, her voice somehow distant, "Be the bridge, be the light. When the iron melts, when the flowers spring from fields of blood, let the land be witness and return home." Manon did not hear the words, did not notice when even Glenys returned to the city looming at her back. For hours, Manon knelt on the battlefield, Abraxas at her side, as if she might stay with them, her 13, for a little while longer. And far away, across the snow-covered mountains, on a barren plain, before the ruins of a once great city, a flower began to bloom. Anyway, so they did it. They broke the curse on the Witch Kingdom. That's where we're stopping because I cannot continue. Thanks for watching with me. I'm sorry, I just read you chapter 90. It's a good chapter. I had nothing to add. I will see you in the next one once I've gathered myself. Okay, bye.